Good morning, honorable members. Good morning to the members.
Recording in progress.
It is now 9:30. This meeting is scheduled to begin at 9:30, and so we would like to begin. Let me just double check that the members of parliament who are meant to be here are present. I see Honorable Douglas is here.
Good morning. Good morning.
I see Honorable Bateman. Honorable Galega Mazibuko is here. I see Honorable Mkonto is here. Welcome back, Honorable Mkonto.
Thank you, Chair.
I don't see any other members. If I've missed you, yeah, I'm sure members will be joining us as we proceed today. And I see Honorable Khanyane is here. Honorable Khanyane, are you well?
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members.
Honorable members and members of National Treasury, this meeting is convened with the express purpose of dealing with the 2025 Appropriations Bill, the Eskom Debt Relief Amendment Bill, and obviously equally so as part of what we were seeking to do is to consider the aspects that deal with our committee program going on in the next term. Naturally, as was the outcome from yesterday about the nature of the delay, we will be finalizing when exactly we will be able to reconvene to complete the committee report. Just for points of clarity needed to be known, the fact that the postponement took place on the basis of saying that we sought a legal opinion, which will be circulated to members. Secondly, that in the light of that legal opinion, the particular processes, the amendments that were being proposed that deal with the proposals made by the respective parties, those research briefs have been sent to both the PBO and equally so will go to the FFC as per agreement. Post the feedback from that, we'll then be convening with the Ministry of Finance, and the report will be finalized in the next week in order that it can be ATC'd and be made available before voting takes place on the 6th of May. I just wanted to bring those points of clarity so that we don't end up in a space where there is general confusion, at least in the South African public. With just those, I want to welcome National Treasury to be here with us. I'm going to ask Mashile if you could put the agenda in front of us so that we know what is on the agenda for today. Can you project it for us, please? You will notice, honorable members, the agenda has been moved. We've only got presentations by National Treasury. We'll then go into deliberations, and then as I've announced that we'll look at the adoption of the committee program for term 2 and the 7th Parliament. And then if there are any announcements, we'll make those towards the end. This is the agenda as proposed for today's meeting. Is there a member who would like to move for the adoption of today's agenda?
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
I second, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Honorable Douglas as the mover and Honorable Galega Mazibuko as the seconder. The agenda being duly adopted, I want to check if there are any apologies emanating from that have been received. Could the committee secretariat be able to give us any apologies that have been sent?
Good morning, Chair and honorable members all on the platform. We've got an apology from the Minister of Finance, the DG, as well as the Deputy Minister of Finance, who are abroad on an official engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Thank you, Mashile. Thank you for those apologies. Are there any other apologies from any party?
Honourable Chair.
Yes, Honourable Bateman. Sorry, platforms such as these ones are difficult, but yes, Honourable Bateman, you can proceed.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just wanted to note on the invitation there were two links, one to Zoom and one to Teams, and a number of us went to the Teams link first, and so that was also the reason why I think one or two people might be slightly late joining this meeting, and I know. I just saw a message now on the group from my colleague, Honourable Kingsley Wakelin, to say that he's waiting to be admitted. I'm not sure if he's yet been admitted to the meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Obani, can you check for me?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think this has been going on for quite some time. We on Zoom, but sometimes the message comes that people are waiting on the lobby in the Zoom. I think it's a technical challenge that we raised with the people concerned. But even Mr. Bateman was on that other one, but he managed to log in, hoping that he will definitely call I'll call him on the side.
Okay. If you can, maybe perhaps if I can ask that on the WhatsApp group, if you can circulate just the Zoom link, which I think was done before, but if you can redo it so that members know where we are meeting and then they can join on that space. Honourable Douglas?
Just giving an apology for Honourable Mawali. He did message me now. He's trying to get into the Zoom as well.
Is it an apology or just a technical? Because we don't want
Just a technical. He's coming in. Yeah.
Okay, let him come in. Let him. I'm sure he'll be admitted into the meeting.
I'm in, Chair.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Honourable members and colleagues, and certainly I see Honourable Wakelin has been admitted in. We will proceed in this meeting. I will, in the format, I will allow for National Treasury to be able to present. Obviously, in the absence of the executive, the minister, and I think we need to note the fact that as far as the Appropriations Committee is concerned, the minister, the two deputy ministers have not attended the respective meetings, and I think it must be noted that the committee must take exception to that, because I think it's important that we engage with the executive, even on some of the political issues. Otherwise, you create the impression that ultimately arrangements can be made elsewhere, whereas actually Parliament must exercise its duty in this particular manner. So Mashile, I think it's important that I will then communicate back to the Ministry of Finance that it is important that they attend the respective meetings that come through. It seems like there's a culture of just finishing apologies and off we move. With those remarks, let me welcome National Treasury. I'm not sure if the DG is present or who will be presenting, and then we will go from there on that. So maybe if whoever the presenter is, if you can intro, and then we can go from there.
Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. It's Rendani from the National Treasury, Acting Head Public Finance. I will be presenting on the appropriation bill, and my colleagues from Asset and Liability Management will be presenting on the Eskom relief bill, and then colleagues from the IGR will be presenting on unfunded mandate. May I request, Chair, through you, for Mr. Mashile to give rights to Tobisa Magazi. She will be controlling the slide on my behalf.
Yes, the rights have been conferred, say.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay.
Chairperson and honorable members, like I said, I will be taking you through the...
Sorry, I want to apologize. I just saw a hand from Honorable Douglas. Was there a mistake, Honorable Douglas?
No, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to check on process before we start. Are we doing each presentation and then a question session and then the next presentation, or are we doing all the presentations up front and then questions at the end?
Honorable member, having read through many of the presentations, what I would recommend that we do is perhaps, given the size, may I propose that we take it in the manner that you proposed? So in essence, take this particular one on the appropriations bill and then deal with the Eskom relief bill, and then we'll deal with the unfunded mandates and then have deliberations. Because if we just compile them all together, we may very well forget where we started and where we are meant to finish. I will allow us to finish this one presentation and then take questions from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, Chair. Put it on a slideshow, Govisa. Chair, like I said, I'll be taking you through the appropriation bill. Important to note is that linked to the appropriation bill is an explanatory note to this bill in the form of estimate of national expenditure. All the 42 votes are in there. So go to the next slide, Govisa. It looks like slides are not moving. Next slide, please. We're still on the first slide. Go to the third slide. It appears that the slides are not moving. Can we hand over to you, Mr. Mashile?
Okay, let's do, yeah. Okay, let me do that.
Apologies for that, honorable members. So while we're still waiting for the slides, honorable members, I can start presenting from slide 3. In the main, it lists the legislation or the acts governing the budget process, starting with the Constitution itself, the Public Finance Management Act, and also the Money Bill and Related Matters Act. Some of the slides will unpack the provisions of the Money Bill and Related Matters Act. Okay, go to slide number 3. Back, this is slide 5. Yes, this is what I was talking about. The legislations guiding the budget process, of which I've already mentioned them. Next slide, please. Okay. Now we come to the provisions of the Money Bill and Related Matters Act of 2009. This is not new since we've already started with the process itself. It talks about the establishment of the Committee on Finances and Appropriations on both sides, which is the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. After tabling of the budget, all the documents were referred to the committees. And the first committee was the Committees on Finance dealing with the fiscal framework, of which that one, the fiscal framework must be considered within 16 days or as soon as reasonably possible. After a consideration of the fiscal framework, we move on to the Division of Revenue Bill, which must be passed within 35 days after the adoption of the fiscal framework. So what brings us here is the Appropriation Bill, which must be passed 4 months. Sorry, I've got a technical problem here. I can't see the full slide now, Mr. Mashile. I don't know what's happening. Can you put it on a slideshow? Yes, thank you.
Yes. Can you see it now?
No, yes, now I can see it now.
Sure.
No, I can't. But anyway, let me proceed. The last bill is going to be the Appropriation Bill, which must be passed within 4 months. In this case, we're talking about end July, beginning of August. Next slide, please. Okay, now we come to the processing of the processing and passing of the Appropriation Bill. Like I said, this gets referred to the appropriation committees. And again, like I said, the appropriation bill is also accompanied by an explanatory note that unpacks, amongst other things, the strategic priorities, measurable objectives, and key performance information for each department and public entities. Important to note is that cabinet members must also present updated strategic plans for each department, public entity, or institute under their control. So, and again, the committee can pass with or without the bill with or without the amendments within 4 months after the start of the financial year to which it relates. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, in here, honorable members, these are the provisions of the Appropriation Bill Section 2. Just to summarize, the Appropriation Bill has got all the 42 votes. The budget is broken down in terms of main divisions, or the commonly used word is budget programs, as well as economic classification. So the Appropriation Bill, if approved, it will be, the spending will be in terms of the Act, the Public Finance Management Act and Division of Revenue Act, and of course, the Treasury regulations. In the bill, we have got Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Schedule 1 in the main are government departments, and Schedule 2 are government components. This is a new sort of a new organizational form. I think at the moment we have got 4 organizational components, like a GTEC that presented spending reviews last month. It's one of the government components. Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services is one of the government components. And again, also their allocation is a transfer on the mother department, if I can put it that way. The next slide, please. So each segment set out in Schedule 2 to the bill is regarded as a main division of a vote for purpose of the Act and the PFM. Schedule 2, like I said, it's the government component. Like I said, this is a new organizational form in government. And again, funds must be spent in accordance with the purpose. So, and again, the head of the government component is an accounting officer, or is accountable for the funds allocated. And again, the government components, they can still incur unauthorized expenditure, even though it's a transfer on the vote. Next slide, please. So we also have an amount listed as specifically and exclusively appropriated. These are ring-fenced funds. We have got 2 types of ring-fencing, earmarking by the National Treasury, meaning that the alternative use can be approved with Treasury approval. And we also have another type of earmarking, which is specifically and exclusively appropriated. This is where the alternative use of those funds, the powers thereof lies with Parliament. Section 4 of the bill talks to the condition for appropriations. The minister may impose conditions, but they are not only limited to earmarking. Those conditions vary considerably depending on the allocation being made, and has got the powers to stop the use of funds, especially in case if a department is not complying with the conditions as provided. Those conditions, they've got legal standing since they are linked to the Appropriation Bill or Stroke Act. Next slide, please. So the minister in writing may, on application by an accounting officer, or amend those conditions. Like I said, he also has the powers to stop those allocations, and that must also be disclosed in the National Treasury's next quarterly report to the relevant parliamentary committees. So on matters related to spending, obviously, when we present quarterly expenditure report to this committee, we'll also disclose those approvals or deviations. Next slide, please. So section 5, Honorable Chair, it talks to the use of unspent funds. The commonly used word is virement. So, and the provisions, these are the provisions that are in the Act. Transfers and subsidies to other institutions can be used for any other purpose within the same vote. And secondly, payments for capital asset can be used for any other purpose within the same vote. Payment for financial asset can be used for any other purpose within the same vote. So, and again, Chair, you will remember that we've got the 8% threshold, beyond which then Parliament has got the powers in respect of virement, meaning that a shifting of funds between the main division stroke budget programs, as it is the commonly used word. So main division or budget programs, it's one and the same thing. Next slide, please. So the same with conditions, the approval of the use of unspent funds must be disclosed in the next quarterly report. In relation to spending, obviously, it will be to this committee. So, and the last bullet, Chair, we also have the 8% threshold. This is in case where we are shifting funds within the main division or the budget program, not between the programs. In this case, it's within a program. It could be under different economic classification. So if it exceeds 8%, the Minister of Finance has got the powers to approve. Next slide, please. So section 6, it talks to the authorization of expenditure. This is expenditure that cannot reasonably be delayed. Things like unforeseeable and unavoidable. Spending that has been announced during the tabling of the budget. I think the last slide will list some of those spending priorities which were announced as part of tabling the budget. So, and the amount of expenditure to be approved may not exceed the total amount for contingency. That's the contingency reserve. For the current financial year, we have got 5 billion in the contingency reserve. Next slide, please. Okay, so the expenditure approved in terms of section 6 is a direct charge against the national revenue and must be attributed to a vote. Is subject to conditions that the minister may impose, and again must be disclosed in the quarterly expenditure report that we present to this committee. And again, that this must be included. There must be an appropriation bill within 120 days. And most of the time, because we cannot give life to section 6 before it becomes an act. So if it gets passed end July, and then the minister invokes section 6, it means that within 120 days, the minister must table an appropriation bill. But normally that 120 days falls within, or it coincides with the adjustment budget stroke MTBPS. Next slide, please. So spending before commencement of the Appropriation Act for 2026, we can pass this slide. This is the slide that provides for transitional arrangements from 25-26 to 26-27. We can pass this slide. There is a slide that talks to spending before the budget is passed. It is in the subsequent slide. No, go back. Okay, so in short, those powers that have been given to the Minister of Finance in terms of the Bill Stroke Act can be delegated to National Treasury official. And those delegations that talks to spending, they are usually delegated to Deputy Director General Public Finance in the National Treasury. So, and those delegations must be in writing. They can be withdrawn anytime. And next slide, please. Okay, the last bullet, it talks to the issue that I've just highlighted, that may var or revoke any decision taken by an employee as a result of the delegation, also subject to any rights that may have vested as a result of the decision. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. So, honorable members, this slide is about expenditure before promulgation of the bill. We must remember that we have never had a situation where a bill or the appropriation bill has been passed before the beginning of the financial year. So what happens then, like in this case, the bill is not yet passed. The state cannot stop functioning. There is section 29 of the PFMA guiding how the department should spend their money before the bill is passed. So there is a sort of a formula, and it works in the following way. So during the first 4 months of the financial year, spending shouldn't exceed 45% of the total amount appropriated in the previous annual budget. Meaning that if in 24-25 appropriation, the appropriated amount was R1, department shouldn't exceed 45 cents in the first 4 months. And what happens if the bill is not yet passed within that 4 months? So therefore, the department in the following subsequent month may not exceed 10% of the total amount appropriated in the previous annual budget, meaning that of the R1 which was appropriated last year, first 4 months, they shouldn't exceed 45 cents. If it's not passed, subsequently, they shouldn't exceed 10% in each month. In aggregate, at the end of the financial year, the total amount spent shouldn't exceed the total amount which was allocated in the previous annual budget, the R1 that I keep referring to. Next slide, please. So now we come to appropriation per vote as set out in Schedule 1 of the appropriation bill. I won't dwell much on this. Next slide, please. So these are the appropriations by vote. The first one being the presidency. The list goes on up until the last vote. I think it's vote 42. In the appropriation bill, these amounts are broken down by economic classification, main division, stroke budget programs. Next slide, please. It's a list of the votes up until the last vote, which is vote 42, land reform and rural development. Important to note, honorable members, is that the newly established department, as a result of split or abolishment of certain departments like public enterprise. You won't see public enterprise here because going forward, we no longer have that. But the bill contains those newly established departments as a result of the split. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, in here is the same appropriation we spoke about, but by main economic classification. The tallest bar there is transfers and subsidies. In the main, transfers to public entities, etc., followed by a compensation of employees at 18%. And you also have other economic classifications like goods and services, payments for capital asset, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, now we come now to the additions to the main budget. Those additions that caters for spending pressures which have been catered for due to this additional, the net increase is 58 billion. You can see that the non-interest expenditure increased from 1.84 trillion in 24-25 to 1.89 trillion in 25-26. And again, this budget, it's the spending pressures that it caters for amounts to 232.6 billion over the MTF. And of these 102 billion, that's 44%, is for the current financial year. So these spending additions are partially offset by drawdowns on provisional allocations, contingency reserves, resulting in a net increase in non-interest expenditure of 58.6 billion that I have referred to. And again, the net increase in non-interest expenditure is mainly funded by the additional revenue raised from the proposed tax increases and the carry through over the medium term. Next slide, please. So these are the spending additions. You can see the headings in bold. Infrastructure investment for the current financial year, it's 14 billion over the MTF, it's 46 billion. Public service wage agreement and its carry-through cost, current financial year, 7 billion. Over the MTF, 23 billion. The list goes on and on. Most importantly, Chair, we also have provisional allocation to frontline services amounting to 70 billion. But for the current financial year is 22 billion. On the right, you can see what the money is buying. For example, for health, it's community services, for the doctors, 800 of them, retention of 9,300 healthcare workers, for the defense force, 5,556 members, for public employment programs, and the list goes on and on. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the total addition to spending over the MTF period. It's a continuation. Important to note is the allocation to SARS for the current financial year. It's 500 over the MTF is 3.5 billion. Important to note, Chair, is that the amount which has been announced as part of the tabling, the 4 billion, is not in there. It will therefore follow Section 6 if the appropriation bill is passed in its current form. So you can see the list of other spending additions. I'm not going to go through them one by one. Employment programs at 4.5, I think that will give us something like 175,000 jobs. There is a project management unit within the presidency running these programs. Next slide, please. So provisional allocation non appropriated is we're unpacking what we have in the previous slide. You can see it, especially the provisional allocations, the 22 billion also that I spoke about. How much goes to education, health, defense, correctional services, home affairs, and other allocations. These are provisional allocations for now, not appropriated to any vote. Next slide, please. So appropriation of expenditure announced by the minister during the tabling of the budget. We have got infrastructure projects in the BFI and the rolling stock fleet renewal program, that is for PRASA, accommodating population changes that impact on the provisional equitable share allocations, strengthening capabilities in the Office of the Chief Justice, Statistics South Africa, SARS. They've got an additional 4 billion announced, an additional 4 billion, that's the amount that I referred to. In the amount which has been allocated or proposed for allocation to SARS at the moment is 3.5 billion. Over and above that, we've got 4 billion. In total, it therefore means that we've got 7.5 billion for SARS. And lastly, political party funding and infrastructure provision for royal houses. I think this concludes my presentation, if not mistaken. Next slide. I think this ends my presentation. Thank you so much, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, DDG. At this point, I will pause here and I will allow for members to be able to table questions. May I ask members who are wanting to make inputs, if you could please indicate by putting up your hand on the device so that I can acknowledge it and then we can go. Keeping in mind that we've still got 2 more presentations coming after this, and this is the first engagement we're having on the appropriations bill. So let me start. Are there any members wanting to ask questions? Honorable Douglas, I recognize you. Are there any other members? Honorable Mkonto. Any other members? Okay, with that in mind, Honorable Douglas, you may proceed.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can see me. I want to greet everybody and say thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. I think I'm also going to echo what you said about the minister and the deputy minister not being here. I think it is a challenge and it's something that we need to address going forward. Today I'm going to speak, on the Treasury's budget framework, which claims that fiscal discipline. But we are in a state now where this budget is going to be exposed today for what it really is. It's an anti-poor budget. It's a budget that breaks people. And this appropriations bill actually doesn't just speak to track record of the political parties of the GNU that's involved. Now it speaks to what the future that they are planning for us as the poor in South Africa, for us as the majority in South Africa. When we look at and we see the proposals to raise VAT by 0.5 percentage points in 2025-26 and another 0.5 the year after, value-added tax hikes are deeply regressive and squeezing the poor to raise revenue. We can suggest some foods be zero rated, but does that truly offset the burden on millions of struggling households? Why is the first instinct to tax bread instead of the billionaires? Because we really believe that a tax on the billionaires and the wealth is what's really required. Let's talk about debt and hidden contingencies. The budget review itself admits 22 cents of every rand of revenue will go to debt service costs, and obscene 340 plus billion rand basically burned to appease creditors. We're paying 1 billion rand a day as South Africans because of austerity measures and because of this IMF World Bank relationship that has now emerged. Minister, the minister needs to answer as to why we are spending more on servicing debt than on educating our youth or healing our sick people. The appropriation bill hides massive slush funds. There's a 37 billion rand in what's called provisional allocations not appropriated to votes. I don't know what that is. This is money kept aside, not transparently allocated to any department while vital services starve. What exactly are these 37 billion in hidden contingencies, and who gets to decide they're used behind closed doors? Should Parliament not know where every rand is going, Mr. Chair? Meanwhile, the Auditor General's reports show waste and mismanagement continue. Provinces racked up 20.7 billion in irregular spending last year. Money spent in violation of rules and regulations, and another 193 million simply fruitlessly wasted. That's an improvement from prior years slightly, but still it's outrageous. We should be asking for ourselves, why are we asking the poor to accept what the minister says is difficult trade-offs when over 20 billion rand is lost to irregular and wasteful expenditure? Instead of cutting public services, why not cut the looting and hold officials accountable? This is the real GNU legacy, protecting the corrupt at the expense of the poor. Not based just on past track record alone, but based upon what's the numbers and the spending priorities in this 2025 appropriations bill. The people of South Africa are told to listen and to tighten their belts, yet Treasury quietly stashes billions and tolerates waste. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank cheer them on. We know the playbook. The IMF's recent assessment practically orders expenditure-based consolidation of at least 3% of GDP over the next 3 years. That's just code for more austerity measures and for harsh budget cuts. Our government, instead of standing up to this, seems very eager to comply, Mr. Chair. How is South Africa's budget choices being made Is it here in Cape Town, or is it in Washington, D.C., or in other places like the IMF headquarters? And who truly dictates our fiscal policy? The people's needs or IMF conditionalities? That's the true questions. Let me be clear. Mkhonto we rejects austerity. We reject the notion of the poor must pay for a crisis that they did not create. We have alternatives which I will outline. But first, allow me to direct a couple of more poignant questions to the people representing the minister, since the minister isn't here. He proposes to hike VAT, a tax all must pay, instead of wealth taxes or windfall taxes. Can he justify why the poorest South Africans should bear the burden of raising 28 billion rand in revenue through VAT increases, while the ultra-rich enjoy one of the world's lowest effective tax rates? Where is the justice in that, especially since the wealthy, those people that are the wealthiest, who are the 7% of the people who apartheid and colonialism benefited, why must they be the ones that don't pay their share? Why can't they all be taxed like the rest of us? I get taxed a lot, just like you and just like normal working class people. The appropriation bill sets aside a contingency reserve of 5 billion rand for 2025-26 and even larger for later years. Yet we simultaneously underfund critical services. What unforeseeable priority is higher than hungry children or crumbling clinics that warrants hoarding billions in a reserve? Shouldn't every available rand be put to work now to alleviate suffering? Our budget includes 37 billion rand in provisional allocations not attached to any department. This looks like a secret kitty. How will they ensure that these funds are not used as a political slush fund or last-minute bailouts for failing SOEs? Because that's what it's been used for in the past. Why not allocate them now to education, to health and housing and hospitals and to water and to creating jobs where the needs are known and urgent right now? That is what we need to be doing, Mr. Chair. The IMF and World Bank often attach strings to their loans, from wage bill cuts to privatization of public assets. And that's what we're seeing is the trend in South Africa. Has South Africa agreed, even informally, to any spending constraints or structural adjustments in exchange for loans or favorable terms? For instance, was the decision to limit public sector wage increases influenced by IMF advice? The nation deserves to know. The fruitless and wasteful expenditure, though lower than before, was still 193 million last year, money literally thrown away. What concrete actions have been taken to recover wasted funds and prosecute offenders? Can we cite even a single high-profile consequence in consequence management for those who wasted public money? Or must we conclude that austerity is only for the poor, not just for the and not for just for the politically connected? We have debt service will consume 22% of our revenue, Mr. Chair. We pay foreign and domestic creditors before we pay our textbooks. Are there plans to renegotiate or restructure any of this debt? Why not pursue lower interest loans from BRICS partners or use quantitative easing by our Reserve Bank to relieve this debt burden? Or is it that forbidden by the financial orthodoxy you dare not challenge in these institutions that lend you money with strings attached? These questions demand answers. A budget is a moral document, and as it stands, Treasury's framework leans on cuts, regressive taxes, and deference to international financiers. In the NK, we said enough is enough. We say no to austerity, and we need to move on from this, Mr. Chair. In department after department, we've seen scandals that siphon money away from public use. The digital vibe scandal at health, the PPE procurement, COVID things. The appropriation bill should read alongside the Auditor General's reports. We need to make sure that we identify the people that are doing this, that are stealing. The AG found irregular expenditure of 20.7 billion at provincial level last year, as mentioned.
Honorable Douglas,
Yes.
I want to protect you, but also protect the meeting.
Okay.
Whilst there are many. If we can, the presentation that we've just been dealing with deals with the appropriations bill, correct? So I'm being cautious also for us not to go into investigations by the SIU, etc. The SIU can be asked to come to committee to come and present on acts of corruption, etc., and the lawmaking process. I'm a bit worrisome to then ask a presentation on appropriations for Treasury to respond on prosecutions or any of that. The questions that you raised about what are the budget inputs, etc., are well and founded, given that we're dealing with an appropriations bill. So if I can ask, just if we confine the questions to the appropriations bill, then that way we can be ordered. Otherwise, we can ask any questions that's broader than what has been presented, and then have the committee then have to deal with questions that are not aligned to the presentation that is before. You can, if you can contain yourself in that space, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure, Mr. Chair. No problem. As MK, we want to see that we are guaranteeing a job or training for every one of our young people, Mr. Chair. We need to use state funds to massively expand the public works program. The current allocation for employment programs in the provisional allocations is 15.17 billion. We say double, triple it massively. South Africa is embarrassingly rich in the rare earth minerals, in oil, in gas, in gold, in diamonds. We've got enough resources if utilized for the public and the greater good of the African Aboriginal and African indigenous people. We've got enough resources if we beneficiate that instead of sending out others raw as we're doing now, and we can have enough to take all our people out of poverty and to create a better future for our people. So we need to make sure that these employment programs get not just supported by using the small tax base we had. We need to make sure that government plays a part in creating a bigger tax base, and that is through the nationalization of our minerals. Mr. Chair, basic education is already free, though quality is unequal. The missing piece is truly free tertiary education for the poor and working class. The Appropriation Bill gives 116.4 billion to higher education, much of which is NSFAS or for student aid. We should progressively move to a model where no qualified student is denied higher education due to a lack of funds. This is an investment. A more skilled populace earns more and pays more taxes later. Let's fund it by cutting corruption and unnecessary defense expenditures if it's not required. We need to do much more in terms of the NHI. If we are truly implementing national health insurance to ensure healthcare for all, we must pay for it. That means the health budget must be rising by large increments each year, not those token increases that barely cover inflation. Hire all the doctors and nurses we train, because right now there is 1,800 doctors sitting at home not having a job. Even those that are now in their what they call their Zoomer year, where they are busy giving a year back, they don't have jobs next year. And they are told that by our public health service that needs hospitals filled with doctors, that have people sitting in queues because there's not enough doctors. And when you got qualified doctors coming out through our education system year in, year out that are sitting at home, this comes from austerity measures. This is the ANC GNU legacy, and it's what's happening to us now, and what they plan for us from here on out. The returns will be a healthier workforce, less days, sick days, and more productive economy. Human settlements budget and water sanitation budget needs to be boosted, Mr. Chair. The backlog of housing is huge, millions still in informal settlements. We propose a public housing construction campaign, learning from places like Singapore, or South Korea or China, which built massive public housing in the development years. This not only gives people homes, but also creates construction jobs and demands for materials. If we look at the reality of where we are at with this budget, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of things that is going on. When you look at KwaZulu-Natal, it has the second largest population and significant rural poverty, yet KZN's outcomes in education or its matric results and healthcare are lagging, suggesting funds aren't used effectively or enough funds don't reach frontline services. We recall how KZN's capital, Pietermaritzburg, saw deadly riots because of the people knowing that there's a sense of injustice. How is the 2025 Appropriation Bill specifically addressing the plight of provinces like KZN and Eastern Cape, where poverty is the deepest? We can't just throw national grants at those provinces and then fail to spend fully in all our areas with the money going back to Treasury. It has been 31 years since 1994. We should not still be talking about former former places that our people come from and treating them differently, Mr. Chair. We don't live under the homelands of the past anymore. There's not one more province that's more important than any other province. Our provinces need to be treated equitably, and the equitable share formula is completely wrong right now and needs to be adjusted. We say this year in, year out, and it doesn't result in anything. Honorable Chair, our children's right to equal and quality education is being violated by this budget austerity. I was shocked to learn that in the past year, the Department of Basic Education managed to build only one new school in the entire country. The department's target was 6. It achieved even worse, just 1. When I was in China, Mr. Chair, with international relations last year, there was a discussion with the New Development Bank, and the New Development Bank said they had just passed grants for South African schools. We can build thousands of schools with NDP money, but that is not an option for us. Why are we not using that as an option for as South Africans? We can have all the schools that we want, and the New Development Bank will give it to us without requesting austerity measures. That we got from the president of the Development Bank herself in a conversation with us, Mr. Chair. The department's budget is 35.5 billion, yet we saw virtually no progress in eradicating unsafe schools. How is it possible that with such an allocation we built only some of schools which is overcrowded, but we're not fixing things like schools that are broken? There's people that are sitting with windows that are cracked every day in winter, that's having to walk in the rain still, they don't have food. We have pit latrines still in a vast majority of schools in certain of the rural areas. What are we doing? We are causing our kids to play with their life when they go and relieve themselves. I mean, Mr. Chair, I can go on and on and on about the challenges that we have. There's still 590 schools that still only use pit latrines. Of these, 340 are in the Eastern Cape and 170 in KwaZulu-Natal, the very provinces that also suffer the deepest poverty. Meanwhile, wealthier provinces have nearly 0 schools left with pit latrines. And these provinces are the obvious ones, Gauteng and the Western Cape. Why is it that we seem to be lagging in some provinces and not lagging in other provinces, Mr. Chair? And it's not just political.
Honorable Douglas, again, I'm not here in serving the National Treasury or anything like that. In as far as infrastructure and all of the questions that you raised, some of them are best located well within the Department of Basic Education. I happen to sit in that portfolio committee, and they are seized with the matter of infrastructure built in schools. So I'm going to ask that if you can we wrap up the questions, because now we are going into multiple areas. May I ask that we wrap up this particular, that focuses on the appropriations bill, because as you can appreciate, we've still got 2 more presentations to go. If I can, Honourable Member, can I give you just 30 seconds just to wrap up the rest of the questions?
Honourable Chair.
Yes, Honourable Bateman.
Thank you. I just want to endorse what you're saying and support you in this. That I think the principle here should be that we don't abuse this platform, but that we use it in a way that is sensitive and respects the equality of the members on the platform as well. You know, if we all were to use this opportunity to go all over the place and
Wait, Honourable Bateman, I hear you and I appreciate what you are saying. I've made a directive to Honourable Douglas, if we can stick to it that way, otherwise it's going to be a discussion amongst members. And I think I would rather, let's give Honourable Douglas 30 seconds to finish and then we can move on from there.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, let me finish by saying this. I disagree. This is appropriations, and appropriations covers every department, and those departments' numbers are in that. And we asking Treasury why they are why is the finance minister putting a budget together that is causing these problems? He can't divorce the appropriations bill from the financial responsibility for infrastructure and for all the health and for policing. It's all in the budget. So yes, I will speak on it, but I will not speak. I'll conclude my questions here, Mr. Chair, and say this is an anti-poor budget, and we need to make sure that in future, that if MK takes over, Mr. Chair, or when it takes over, we're going to have a pro-poor budget that will make sure that the money that we have is utilized for the poor, that we don't have austerity measures, and that we use the resources to free up people from poverty. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mkhonto.
Good morning, Chair, to you, honorable members, colleagues, and our guests. Chair, I will request to switch off my video. You have
That's
seen
fine,
Ms.
Honorable Mkhonto. Yes.
Yes. Chair, my first question will be on the COVID-19 budget allocation. I have seen they are having for the 2025-2026 financial year, there is 35 billion, if I'm not, if I've counted, I was listening very well how they did their presentation. And on the MTEF, on the other years, there is nothing, hence is total for the MTEF. My question, Chair, is to exactly where did this money, these funds, exactly allocated, and what exactly purpose did it serve? Because, Chair, we were promised a hospital and other things, and they never came to light. My second question, Chair, I want to check where is the compensation or the salaries of ministers and deputy ministers allocated? Is it on the compensation of employees or in the office of the president? Because, Chair, in our public hearings, South African citizens were complaining about the bloated executive and the budget that has to be used for their salaries and perks. The other one, Chair, will be on the we have experienced, Chair, that we provide adequate allocation for infrastructure and other essential spending areas. But then maybe as a suggestion, maybe the National Treasury has to guide in terms of maintenance of the infrastructure, where we have ring-fenced funds to make sure that there is maintenance, because seemingly in all the votes is about new infrastructure, and there is no guidance as to how can maintenance being done. That is why we end up with potholes on our roads. We end up with failing infrastructure in our municipalities. That will be, yes, Chair, that will be my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mkhonto. Honorable Deputy Director General, I wanted just to put just some questions. You made the slide on legislative components. Because the appropriation bill is voted for by votes, I maybe might have missed them in terms of vote 1 to vote 42. What happens if some of the votes pass, but some of don't by the 4-month period? So that's what I'm trying to understand from a legislative point of view. Treasury, the second question is, Treasury often prepare technical reports that come from projects that have been rejected or the department's own proposals in as far as how allocations are being made. Obviously, each department has got their annual performance plans, etc., etc. Is there any point at being able to put together a summation of those reports so that we understand where were some of the things that could not be funded within this particular fiscal year? Because that would have an implication as to what happens. Because my third question really links to the outer year, which is the third year, in looking at some of the projections that have been put forward, given the fact that there must be reporting within Treasury For example, you've made allocations for social grants, etc., etc. Those may change in the outer year on the basis of whether there are more children, less children, there are more elderly, less. Is there a report of such a nature, and ultimately would it be able to be shared with this particular committee so that we begin to understand when we look at the entire budget frame, we look at not only this year, but the inner year and the outer year, so that we begin to understand on that score. The BFI windows that have been open, I welcome and I appreciate the allocation that comes through. The difficulty is that obviously understanding that many of these projects have to be, if you like, shovel ready if they are going to qualify for some of the BFI window funding. I'm just trying to understand, is there must, I would assume, a unit within Treasury that is focused on assisting provinces who lack capacity to be able to do so, considering that over the medium term, as you've allocated by main economic classification, a lot of infrastructure build will take place in the next year. The dilemma is when you eventually get to municipalities and provinces, you often discover capacity is lacking. And so only a few provinces then actually apply within the BFI windows that become open because they've got the capacity to do so, and they get ready legislatively and with all the provisions that allow them to comply. But then you find other provinces, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, etc., don't always comply, don't always qualify. So opening the BFI windows, sure, you've increased the number, I'll check how many, but I'm wanting to understand how you hope that how's the capacity building in that regard. You make a note in the presentation that says that the public sector wage bill has gone higher than expected. Now, as a committee, we're seized with this matter, given the fact that this operates outside Treasury's own hands, and ultimately you end up being lumped with higher above inflation increases coming back. What is your response to that particular, and what mechanism would you advise the committee to be able to begin to advance so as to safeguard this notion of above inflationary increases given to cost of employees, which is your second highest allocation as per your allocation, the slide, I think it's slide 24, you talk about in terms of main economic classification. What is your view on saying that how do we manage that particular issue? Because is it going to be a continuous bit that says, okay, you will budget at X, you will arrive at Y, and then it is incumbent upon Treasury in the appropriations bill to fund the funding for it? So my only other question is, I met in a closed meeting, and I can't share the details of that, obviously, with the Defense Portfolio Committee, and it's become common cause that Defense argues the case that they are woefully underfunded. They've got a defense review plan, and maybe part of why I was asking you about some of the technical reports is beginning to understand the appropriations that goes to defense, given the fact that you listen to some of the reports that come from that Defense Portfolio Committee. It is common cause that defense is on the verge of collapse. The DRC intervention that we had there and the withdrawal of the troops is only but the tip of the iceberg. It's the equipment failures, etc. So I'm wanting to understand where, if there is a view on the technical report that looks at the defense funding. It is common. Lastly, sorry, I know I feel like that pastor who says lastly, but I want to understand on the underfunding of teaching. Yes, we are not here to debate VAT and the division of revenue bill. We're talking about appropriation as it goes to education. Now, transfers to provinces have meant that some of the provinces are beginning to cut, in certain instances, teachers, and other instances, feeding programs. Is there any way to be able to create, or again, we need to look at how best we can recapacitate funding within those spaces, simply because the quality of education will be severely impacted? If you look at some of the public submissions we've had, if you look at the fact that provinces themselves have come back with a view, now that's in the DORA bill, but I'm trying to understand for appropriations for education, how do we look at that given the fact that the majority of that budget, I'm almost certain, goes to cost of employees, doesn't really go into infrastructure, let alone the idea of saying, how do we better fund education so that we can improve its own quality? Dr. Randan, let me hand over to you and then we can respond. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair and honorable members. Let me try to deal with
recording stopped.
Deal with the questions raised, and my colleagues will also come in. Starting with the issues raised by Honorable Douglas, just to indicate that the discussion on the fiscal framework also touched in the main on the revenue proposals. And also public hearings also touched on the revenue proposals. And we also responded extensively to those issues. We can share with the committee, because that report was also shared with the Standing Committee on Finance. So we can share with this committee our responses. That discusses in length, or explains in length, the choices being made, one of which is the one on tax increase. Coupled with that, Chair, you will remember that on the 14th of March, when we met, I think at, is it Good Hope Center or somewhere there, the Commissioner of SARS even offered to have a session with the committee wherein he can also explain in length the issue of wealth tax. In that meeting, he just raised a few questions to say, how do we define wealth? We must also remember that we are already taxing the wealthy ones. So that's the issue on tax. The 37 billion and the issue of the slush fund. The proposals in there are very clear. It's not those allocations. They are not a slush fund. You can see where the money is going, especially for frontline services. You can see education, correctional services, health, etc. And again, this House will also have an opportunity after 120 days to look at the allocations. At the moment, it's just provisional, but not proposed for allocations now. But you can see the priorities that those funds are aiming to, or the priorities that they are aiming to prioritize. And then the budget choices being made. The budget process is a consultative process, starting with the technical engagements with the department. And thereafter, it's going to be the TCB, Technical Committee on Budget. After that, it's going to be MINCOMBAT, Ministers' Committee on Budget, Cabinet, and ultimately Parliament. So it's a consultative process. The choices that are being made goes through that channel, starting with the technical engagement with the department themselves up until Parliament. Honorable Mkonto, COVID-19 budget allocation, the 35 billion is for the SRD grant that has been extended by a year. We have also indicated in our engagement that there's also a review of the LMP's active labor market programs. That will also touch on the reconfiguration of the SRD. It's a study that GTEC is busy with. It's almost done. So that I'm addressing the question on the 35 billion. That is for SRD. Salaries of ministers and deputy ministers, where is this? In each vote, under program 1, you will see a sub-program called ministry. That's where departments are budgeting for, among others, ministers, COE or compensation for employees, including deputy ministers. Guidance on maintenance. when departments budget for infrastructure, they are supposed to also budget for maintenance. But the budget is sitting with the departments, but maintenance is done somewhere else by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. Departments are only allowed to maintain for small maintenance. I forgot the threshold. I think it's 100,000 or so. But maintenance is done by Public Works. But ideally, departments themselves, when they budget, they are supposed to also budget for maintenance. Let me also link this one with the question raised by the Honorable Chair on BFI windows and the capacity in the provinces and the capacity by other provinces to prepare their projects. Though the submissions that are being made, one, I don't want to use the word rejected because they don't get rejected. Even when they are tossed back to the infrastructure fund to assist those municipalities or the sponsors in shaping up those projects. But the capacity is also within the infrastructure fund linked to the BFI project. I think my colleagues from IGR can also chip in when it comes to maintenance. For example, I think a certain percentage of the budget it's supposed to be earmarked for maintenance. I think it's 10% or 5% or so, but my colleagues from IGR can confirm. And again, within the Department of Cooperative Governance, also my colleagues can also come in here. There are also conditional grants that are earmarked for the capacitation of the municipalities. On COE, my colleague Marumo can also come in and talk to the issue that the chairperson raised. I will also invite my colleague Mashudu to talk on defense, and other colleagues can also come in to deal with other questions that I might have omitted. Thanks, colleagues, starting with Marumo on COE, Mashudu defense, IGR colleagues on other issues that I might have omitted. Over through you, Chair, back to you, to my colleagues through you, Chair.
Thank you, DDG.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not sure, are you able to see me, Honorable Chair? I did try to speak on my video. Hopefully you can be able to see me. And good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members. As DDG has already introduced me, my name is Marumo Mage. I am the acting DDG for Budget Office in the Treasury. I think as it relates to your question, Honorable Chair, and you correctly pointed it out, I mean, on the issues relating to the public service wage. I mean, as you've put it, I mean, wage setting in the public service and probably in the public sector as a whole, it's a function of a collective bargain. And collective bargain on its own is a very difficult process. I mean, because each of the parties that get involved in this process come with its own expectation. And more often, I mean, you end up in a situation where you have to reach a compromise. You, as the state, we go with our own expectation, with our own outcome in mind. Labor also come with their own expectation of the outcome that we want to achieve. And as a result, then the discussion starts there. As you said, often it ends up with a compromise position, where from our side, if you want to end up with inflation, end up with something higher than what we expected. I think moving forward, what we think will assist, and which is what we did when we entered the current process. We are thinking that if we can start, entering into this multi-year agreement, they will start to give us some certainties in the budget planning moving forward. Because then what they will do is that, I mean, as and when we plan for the next LTF, we have already settled on a certain level with the union. As and when we plan for those baselines, it will make it easy for us to take those things into account and ensure that there are no disruptions as and when we implement this budget moving forward, which is, I mean, the stuff that often comes as and when you implement the budget. But from your question as to how can you assist, because often these things, as you may be aware, on the chair, I mean, some of these are more political than administrative. So I think the continuous political engagement at the political levels with the leadership of some of the trade unions that are seated in various Balkan countries will assist, especially in trying to help them understand the fiscal positions of the country, and with your committee as well intervening and as a third party in this instance, rather than us as the employer trying to convince the labor. I mean, if you can come in as a committee as well to assist in those processes by engaging with labor at a political level, help them understand from your own perspective what the financial situation of the country is. I think those discussions can help the process, because if it's just labor and employer engagement, I mean, as I said, then you end up not from both sides, not necessarily coming out with the expected outcome that we have wanted. But as I said, Chair, I mean, we hope that the current 3-year agreement that we put in place will help us in maintaining the credibility of the fiscal framework moving forward. However, as Dr. Rendana has already said, I mean, multi-year wage agreements in their nature, they tend to be expensive in the first year, which was the case in this one. I mean, in the first year, we had to add additional funding because in the baseline, we had only budgeted for CPI. And for the first year, we settled at a higher range than the CPI, but for the 2 outer years, we tried to align everything with CPI, which is aligned in a way aligned to the baseline and the plan that we have over the next year. So yeah, I think that's in a nutshell, Chair, the story around the wage bill, but we will really welcome any intervention, even at your level, as and when we embark in those processes to also help labor to understand what our fiscal positions are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Chair and honorable members. My name is Mashudu Bija. I'm responsible for the security cluster departments, including the Department of Defense. I just want to address your question, especially around the underfunding of the Department of Defense. Yes, we also, on the 2nd of April this year, met with the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans, and they did raise the issue of historical underfunding of the Defense Force sharply. But I wish to indicate to this committee that the main issue within the defense is their persistent overspending on their compensation of employee budget. And this is something that we've always made it also visible to this committee, especially during the quarterly spending reports. And as part of addressing that in this budget, Honorable Chair and members, you will notice that actually, and I also made this point to the Portfolio Committee, that this is the most progressive budget for the Department of Defense. Over the next 3 years, this budget proposes around 11.8 billion rand towards defense. And as part of dealing with this historical shortfall on compensation of employee, you will know that this budget also proposes, Honorable Chair, the issue of early retirement without penalization of pension benefits to try and deal with some of these teething problems, especially within the Department of Defense. And this budget also makes a proposal to allocate around 6.8 billion rand over the next 3 years to deal precisely with the shortfall on the defense compensation of employee. This allocation, it's part of those provisional allocations that Dr. Randela also highlighted earlier. So the way we see it to deal with the critical problems within defense in the short to medium term is the issue of implementation of early retirement, and we are working closely with the Department of Defense, and the department has shown some interest as the issue of early retirement will also assist the Department of Defense to rejuvenate the force, to make the force a bit more younger. And and of course, the additional allocation on compensation of employees will then also address the issue of this historical shortfall. Thanks, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members.
Sorry, I will leave it to later, and I want it because we've got to keep going. But I'd asked about, I hear your response regarding that the technical work that has been done then gets sent back. What I wanted to understand is whether or not there could be a way of being able to brief the committee so that we understand what is coming down the line, really some of the projects that have been either rejected, sent back to provinces, etc., something like that. And then obviously the conversation about the outer year is but one conversation, but we can proceed from there, and then perhaps maybe in the next round we can begin to go just in the interest of the meeting going. I want to then proceed. Sorry, I see a hand here. Is it Malaka? Is the device name?
It's Malika.
Sorry, I apologize.
All right, good morning. Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. I just wanted to address quickly your question around the outer year allocations, and I don't know if we get it correctly. In the E&E chapter where you have all the...
We can't hear you, remember your signal is bad.
Oh gosh, is it any better? Is it any better,
Sorry,
Chair?
is it my device? Or can anyone else hear?
Chair, I think it might be your device there, because you're breaking up. But
Mashile,
I can
can I ask you to just check
the speaker quite clearly?
We can hear her, Chair.
We can hear. I think it's your device, Chair, or your network.
Okay. Let's proceed. Let's proceed. Can you be brief, Honorable Ma'am?
Oh, yes, Chair. I just wanted to be sure we understand your question around outer year allocations, and to point that we have these allocations indicated in the expenditure of estimates of national expenditure. In the big chapter where we have all the votes, we have allocations for the 3 years. So whether that addresses your question or whether you're asking for something else in addition. Thank you, Chair.
No, I was asking for the basis upon which, because the outer year in many ways, in many instances, is built on a number of set assumptions. I gave the example of SASSA, that your modeling must be able to indicate to you how many children you potentially will have in the outer year, whether our population is growing, not growing, how many children will be in school, etc., how many pensioners will be around. That is the assumption upon which you base the outer year, or are you just inflation adjusting? That was my question. Of course, I know the appropriations are there.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We can look at what is it that is possible to provide, but yes, there are assumptions that are calculated, just like is happening with the municipal allocations. There are estimates around population growth and the number of children that are thrown into the assumptions that leads to the estimation around the growth. But then the other additional factor become the question of affordability, of whether we have funding. And then that influences the extent to which you can be able to give additional allocation for the specific subject that you're dealing with. So perhaps we can engage further with the chair through you, Dr. Randela, and see what specific information the chair is looking for and see how that can be provided. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, I would appreciate that. And I tell you why it's important is because that outer year, in many ways, is built on assumption. And if this committee, what we've now learned is that obviously, if you are trying to amend, as the Money Bills and Related Matters Act puts on the table, if you're trying to amend things within the current year, it is legally and technically very difficult. So we need, as a committee, to be able to be empowered about that middle and outer year, because those are the ones that are still, if you like, influenceable if we are going to achieve the use of the legislative powers that the committee has. And that really is the long-term objective here. But if we can, DDG, if I can ask that we move on to the next presentation on the Eskom bill, and then we can speak about the unfunded mandates. We are conscious of time, so if I can ask that we proceed, members would have been given their respective presentation in of itself. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, and good morning, Honorable members. My name is Wanga Kibi. I'm the Acting DDG for Assets and Liability Management. I will hand over to my colleague, Jeff Kuvane, who will take the committee through a few slides on the Eskom debt relief amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanga, and good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. Mr. Mashan, can I request that you assist with flighting the presentation? Honorable Chair, I'm going to be taking you through the presentation on the Eskom debt relief. If you can proceed to the next slide. So in essence, the debt relief package, honorable members, was meant to assist Eskom in uplifting its balance sheet so that at the end of the day, Eskom can return to a standing alone without having to rely on the fiscus for support. Members would be aware that Eskom would always be provided with government support in order to remain financially sustainable and to also be able to execute its capital requirement program. So with the debt relief, we sought to assist Eskom to migrate firstly to a financial position that will be enable the entity to be a going concern, and secondly, to be able to roll out its capital program as required. So the debt relief was announced by the minister in his budget in 2023, committing government to 254 billion, which was meant to stabilize the balance sheet of Eskom, to support the entity in its restructuring effort, and ensure that it invests in its critical maintenance. Subsequent to that, a Debt Relief Act was published in the Government Gazette after the President assented, and the Debt Relief Package or the Act stipulates the amounts that will be allocated to Eskom. That will be a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund. In terms of the Act, Eskom was to receive 78 billion in 23-24, 64 billion in 24-25, 40 billion in 25-26. Additionally, in 25-26, Eskom the Act provides for a government to take over about 70 billion of Eskom debt. The debt relief, the allocations were exclusively earmarked for the servicing of debt and interest alone. No operational expenditure is catered for. The Act further empowers the Treasury to advance these amounts to Eskom as loans on dates determined by the Minister. And the disbursements are to align with Eskom's debt repayment schedule and be limited to the specific amounts for each financial year. So Eskom would give us a schedule of their debt maturities, and as they mature, we'll then advance the payments or disperse the payments for Eskom to actually meet those obligations. The advances or these disbursements were planned to take the form of interest-free subordinated loans and to be settled through the issuance of shares rather than cash payments. And this is essentially to enable entity to enhance his liquidity management. The disbursement of these loans is conditional upon the repayment of pre-identified Eskom debt instruments. As I said, Eskom will actually give us their debt schedule, and then we'll be able to then provide these disbursement. Section 2, subsection 2B of the Act empowers the minister to determine conditions for the conversions of the portions of the loans or of the amounts that for each financial year into ordinary shares to be issued to Eskom by the state, which is required to comply, which Eskom is required to comply from the 1st of August 2023 to 31st March 2026. What this essentially says is that linked to this package, the minister was then empowered to determine conditions that will give effect to the conversion of the portions that are provided to Eskom into equity. As I said, they are actually disbursed as subordinated loans. So if Eskom comply with the conditions, then that portion of the loan that was disbursed would then be converted into loan. However, in 2023 and 2024, National Treasury introduced the interest on the debt relief package. As I said, initially, it was planned to be an interest-free loan, but then in 2024, it was then converted into an interest-bearing debt, and which was meant to reflect the cost of this arrangement, and the interest are charged at market rate level. And this approach differs from the initial approach, which envisaged an interest-free loan. Interest is charged on all disbursed amounts and continues to accrue until the relevant portion of the loan is converted into equity. So if a loan is provided and Eskom has not yet complied with the condition, or has not yet been provided with that letter or confirmation by the minister, then an interest continues to be levied on that portion. And the government has provided Eskom with 100 billion in financial year 2025, in 2023, by 2025 February, 100 billion, and 76 billion was converted in 2023, 2024, 8 billion in 2024, 2025, both were converted into equity. An additional 16 billion was transferred to Eskom as a loan in February 2025, and the remaining 40 disbursed in March, completing for 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025. The allocations were 76 billion and 64 billion. At December, which is the quarter that we still have the report on, Eskom had paid about 92 million of interest into the fiscus. The next slide. Next slide, please. So by March year end, which just ended now, government had advanced about 140 billion to Eskom. Members would note that this is a reduction of 4 billion from what was initially planned. The reduction was as a result of Eskom's failure to meet the deadline for the disposal of the Eskom Finance Company. This is a loan book that Eskom was required to dispose. Eskom had failed to dispose of it, and the 4 billion is as a result of the independent valuation that we received, which indicated that the value of the book was 4 billion. So in 2023, 2024, the amount disbursed was reduced by 2 billion, hence a 76 billion was transferred. In 2024, 2025, the 2 billion again was reduced, which then resulted in Eskom receiving 64 billion. Under terms of the arrangement, the remaining element, which is for this current financial year, is the 40 billion and the 70 billion debt takeover that was penciled for 2026, 2025, 2026. And as we move towards the close of the debt relief period, which is March 2026, we had engagements with Eskom, and the essence of those engagements was to agree on the simplification of the last phase of the debt relief, primarily related to the 70 billion that was meant to be taken over by the state. And the outcome of those discussions, we both realized that it may be quite cumbersome and difficult to physically take over the debt of 70 billion, because we'd need to get the lender consent. There will be some legalities that we'll have to pass through. So we then agreed that, looking at the financial position of the entity, as well as how the debt relief has actually assisted the entity so far, that we would firstly reduce the 70 billion to 50 billion, and the allocation will be 40 billion in 2025-2026, and then the remainder, which is 10 billion, will be dispersed in 2028-2029. And the approach now will not be to physically take on the debt, but will be to disperse further loans into Eskom. So in 2024-25, instead of the 40 billion that was meant to be dispersed, it will now be 80 billion, and then the remaining 10 will come in 2028-2029. So in summary, the 254 billion that was initially penciled in has been reduced to 230 billion. There's a 24 billion that has been then reduced in this debt relief. The next slide, thanks. So as I've indicated, that the reduction of the 70 billion then meant that we would need to amend the Act to give effect to the additional, or to the new approach that we've agreed on. So now Section 2 of the Act of the 2023 will then be amended to give effect to that. So instead of the 40 billion in 2025-2026, you will have now the 80 billion, and then the 10 billion will then come into effect in 2028-2029. The next slide. These, as I mentioned earlier, there are 9 conditions that we term strategic conditions. These are the conditions, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that give effect to the conversion of the loan to equity. Essentially, key among these conditions, firstly, is that the disbursement are only to settle the debt and interest payment. Secondly, is that the entity is restricted from undertaking new capex. Instead, any capex that is new, Eskom would have to request the minister's approval. The second part, the second biggest one, or the third, is Eskom is not allowed to go and borrow new facilities without the minister's approval. This is to ensure that this intervention is not negated by Eskom going into the market and raising further debt while we're trying to reduce their debt. At the same time, the framework, the government guarantee framework that was allocated to Eskom of 350 expired on the 31st of March 2023, meaning Eskom is no longer enjoying any guarantees to back its debt. However, Eskom is still allowed to draw down on the facilities that by the 31st of March 2023 were existing. So Eskom is still able to draw down on those facilities. At the same time, Eskom is allowed to continue to prioritize the implementation of the unbundling, and that we've seen with the establishment last year of the new National Transmission Company of South Africa, which is a subsidiary of the Eskom Holdings Company. So you would have the Eskom group. Underneath, you'll have 3, according to the plan, you'll have 3 subsidiaries, which will be your distribution, your transmission, and generation. Also included was that any transaction in terms of the PFMA would then be subject to joint approval at the time by the Minister of Public Enterprises and the Minister of Finance, and this time it will be the Minister of Electricity and Energy and the Minister of Finance. This, in terms of the PFMA, members may be aware that the executive authority is the one that approves, and then the Minister of Finance note. So in this instance, all the transactions under Section 54 are jointly approved by the minister and the ministers. Next slide. So in ensuring that we monitor the compliance of the conditions with Eskom, a task team was established that comprises officials from NT, Department of Public Enterprise at the time, and then now it will be Electricity and Energy, and Eskom. The task team is tasked to monitor compliance with Eskom on a quarterly basis, and then report to the minister on whether Eskom qualifies for the loan to be converted to equity or not. Where Eskom meets all the prescribed conditions, the loan amounts are then converted into equity, and then the interest also falls off, and Eskom is no longer charged with interest going further. However, failure by Eskom to comply any conditions or with any conditions results in the delay of the conversion. And then, as I said, the interest continues until the following quarter. So Eskom is given a quarter. We do quarterly sessions. So in this quarter, if Eskom does not meet the conditions, it's given another quarter to then comply. And then we will then reassess the subsequent quarter, the outstanding balance end of the term, which will be in the March 2026. And after this date, will be treated as a liability on the Eskom books, and will be payable in cash by Eskom or on market terms. And if necessary, a new loan agreement will then be entered into from the 1st of April 2026. And that will then require Eskom to settle that outstanding balance within 1 year. It is therefore in the interest of Eskom to then comply with all the conditions, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, to benefit from this intervention, so that they are able to then improve their balance sheet. Failure to comply will not only increase its interest costs, but may also lead to the minister to reduce future allocations under the debt relief, which we've seen with the reduction of the 4 billion because Eskom could not meet the condition to dispose of the EFC. And we must mention here also, Chair, that for the past 2 financial years of the inception of the debt relief, Eskom has been complying with the conditions. Hence, the 76 billion in the first year was converted. In this 24-25 year financial year ending, 8 billion has already been converted. The remaining 56, we are still waiting for the report, which will come in at the end of this month. We will then reassess whether Eskom has met all the conditions, and if it meets all the conditions, then this amount also will also be converted into equity. We must also mention that, seeing what the intervention has done, we are at this stage comforted by the progress that Eskom has made from its financial position. At this stage, we are seeing the entity that it has turned, it has been able to turn around. It is now a going concern. It has closed the financial year ending 31st March on a comfortable cash position. We are still waiting for the financial audited financials to come through, but we are anticipating that at this financial year ending 31st March, Eskom will be able to then declare a profit, which is a significant move from where the entity was before with the losses that it was incurring. So this debt relief has actually assisted to an extent in ensuring that the entity is able to then turn around. But I must indicate, Chair, that there are risks that we are also monitoring, which are of concern. Among those is the municipal debt, which is increasing at a significant rate and which threatens the sustainability of the entity into the future. We are also looking now at the reasons for decisions by the regulator on the tariff determination that has recently been announced, to see what that would mean in terms of the impact on the entity's financial position going forward. Chair, let me pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for that comprehensive report on the Eskom debt relief bill. Can I ask if there are members who would like to pose questions? If you could just indicate so at this point. I recognize Honorable Bateman. Are there any other members? Honorable Douglas and Honorable Galega Mazibuko. And then Honorable Mukonto. That being said, let us begin with you, Honorable Bateman, keeping in mind that we have a program that we've still got one more bill to consider today. So, Honorable Bateman, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thank you to Dr. Holvane. Apologies if I've got that wrong, but I just wanted to ask, will Eskom require further bailouts to remain operational? And secondly, what evidence do you have in this regard that you can present to the committee? And thirdly, what role does Treasury play in relation to Eskom executive remuneration? Fourth, what incentives are paid to Eskom executives and how are those incentives determined? And fifthly, this is something I would like a report back to the committee on, because I don't expect that you would have this information necessarily at your fingertips. But please, could you disclose to the committee the roles and the annual remuneration levels of the 100 highest paid employees at Eskom, including the makeup of their remuneration, the basic salaries, other benefits, and incentives? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Honorable Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions, I just want to check with Treasury, what is the current interest rate being charged to Eskom on the 230 Rand billion bailout? How much will Eskom owe in interest by 2028? And then why was the original 70 billion of debt takeover clause deleted? And what modeling did Treasury use to claim Eskom is now improved? Where is the audit to confirm these figures? And who sits on the Eskom Quarterly Monitoring Task Team, or EQMTT? Is Parliament represented there? I know there's a number of people's or organizations represented there, but I don't see Parliament. And this particular task team has the power to delay or deny the conversion of public loans to equity. So I want to find out, how did they get that power? And are we now participating in them hijacking this thing? What happens to the money if Eskom fails to comply with conditions by 31st March 2026? Will it be written off or paid back to taxpayers? How was the 10 billion tranche for 2028-29 calculated? Why 2028 and 2029? Well, we have a feeling that there are some hidden liabilities that Eskom have maturing in that year, and we want to find out if that's the case. And please, can you just elaborate on that? And then why are interest payments by Eskom not being ring-fenced to avoid further debt spirals? And where are the names of Eskom's failing contractors, diesel intermediaries, and coal cartels that continue to siphon off billions? Why does this debt relief prohibit Eskom from investing in new generation projects unless approved by the minister? Is this not sabotaging our future energy independence? And why must the minister have the last say? It should be Parliament that should be here. And what has Treasury modeled what happens if Eskom fails the compliance test repeatedly until March 2026? Will this sink our credit rating? And can you give us some feedback on that, if there has been some kind of modeling? And why does Parliament have no oversight over how these loan to equity conversions occur? Why is Treasury allowed to operate in a fiscal black box? And what is the actual value of Eskom's non-core asset sales, like the Eskom Finance Company? Why was the target missed in 2024? And why are the derivative contract balances and hedges being micromanaged by Treasury? Is there losses inside that we should know about? And maybe you can give me some guidance there. And then lastly, is Treasury using the conditionality clauses as a way to force unbundling and future privatization through backdoor legislation? So, Mr. Chair, thank you. That's my questions for now.
Thank you, Honorable Douglas. Honorable Galega Mazibuko.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I'm going to be very short because my first question has already been asked by Honorable Bateman on further bailouts on Eskom. But also, what I would like to know from Treasury is the capacity. Does Eskom have the capacity to improve or to turn around the current situation and to be sustainable without depending on bailouts? I think I elaborate on that, but the first question has been asked. And also in terms of the municipalities, is there improvement on the municipalities' payments to Eskom? Because we know that a lot of municipalities are owing Eskom. And are there specific plans to ensure or to assist Eskom to recoup these monies that are owed by municipalities? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Galega Mazibuko. Honorable Mkhonto.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I have one question or comment. We are very much encouraged to learn that Eskom might report a profit at the end of for the end of the financial year 2024-25. That is good news, Chair. If it will happen, we'll really be encouraged as South Africans. Chair, the issue of the risks, the municipal debt that is referred to here, Chair, can we call the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs? Because there is this IGR policy. Yes, municipalities are owing Eskom, but departments, provincial and national departments, are owing municipalities millions and billions of rands when it comes to electricity. Can municipalities be assisted on that to make sure that they get the funds to pay their debts to Eskom? Because now it appears as if municipalities are alone in this, yet there are departments that are owing municipalities. Thanks, Chair. That will be my comment.
Thank you very much. I suppose part of the committee's question would be to look at whether or not have there been any significant prosecutions on Eskom's infrastructure vandalism and whether employees have been taken. So I know I'm putting the question to Treasury, whether there have been any accountability on that issue, because when you look at infrastructure maintenance, the dilemma that Eskom faces is that in new areas, it's got new infrastructure, and in old apartheid areas, as it were, townships, in that sense, where the spatial legacy, there's aging infrastructure there. And so what naturally happens is that you have load reduction that takes place. And so that's on one score about maintenance of that infrastructure, but also on the vandalism aspect. what is the net loss that Eskom faces up to? And I suppose that might be a question to them. And whether there have been a success rate in any convictions of the implicated individuals as it pertains to this, because this bill seeks to deal with Eskom's debt problems, but debt doesn't get solved when infrastructure maintenance is falling behind. That's what, in some instances, has been one of the reasons has been given for load shedding. Let me allow you to respond to that, and then it'll be quick, and then we've got one last presentation still to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. If I may start with questions posed by Honorable Bateman. Further bailouts, we do not at this stage anticipate any further bailouts from Eskom. From where we are sitting and where we're looking at the numbers, we are quite comfortable at this stage that Eskom would not require further bailouts. But as I said, there are risks that we are actually looking into, which is municipal debt, as well as other risks related to their ability in terms of their internal generated revenues, which is largely linked to the tariff as well as the sales of the business. So at this stage, we are not anticipating Eskom to come back to us either for further bailouts or for guarantees. We are not looking at that. The evidence is based on what we are on the numbers that we are looking at and how we looking at their financial models. Remuneration. So in the conditions, you would note that one of the conditions was that Eskom is encouraged to issue remuneration that will not affect its financial position. We are not determining what the remuneration should be, but what we are saying is that it should not impact negatively on the entity's financial position. At a particular stage, sometimes previously, we did have a condition that restricted Eskom from providing incentive, but in this instance, it's a condition that says Eskom must provide remuneration that is not actually negatively impacted its financial position. We do not necessarily, as NT, get involved in the determination of the entity's financial incentives for the ExCo or any of its staff members. We will look into the request around the 100 highest paid. We do not have that information offhand. We can make a request from Eskom and then we'll submit it to the committee. To then Honorable, if I may go to the next set of questions. Interest rates. Interest rates that we are charging to Eskom are market related and are updated on a monthly basis that we're using internally the Treasury bills in NT. So far, as I've indicated, the rates, the amount that Eskom has paid by 31st December 2024 was 92 million. And we do not anticipate that this will be a burden on Eskom. When we looked at the amounts that we will be charging, we made sure that we balance this delicate act of ensuring that we do not actually negate what we are trying to do by imposing huge interest on Eskom. But as I also indicated, it is upon Eskom to ensure that they comply with the conditions so that firstly they can deal with the interest, and secondly they can benefit from the conversion of the loan into equity. The monitoring task team, it comprises only of officials from NT, Eskom, and the department as the executive authority. There is no role for Parliament in that. We do not have parliamentary representation in that. And I must also indicate that the powers for the minister are actually derived from the Act. So the Act gives the minister the power to actually determine the conditions that will be associated that will be determined to convert the loan. We do not have, as the committee, power on anything. We do recommend. What we do is we assess compliance and then we recommend to the minister, and the minister is empowered by the Act will then determine whether Eskom has complied or not. We do make that recommendation. What happens to money? What happens if Eskom has not complied? As I indicated, Eskom is given another quarter to then comply. We reassess their compliance. If they haven't complied, that portion of the loan that was dispersed and Eskom has not complied, then stand over to the end of the term. At the end of the term, it will be a new loan that Eskom will have to pay on the market-related rates. The 10 billion, yes, the 10 billion, it's actually, we arrived at the 40 and 10 based on Eskom's debt maturity. As I indicated, the debt relief is purely earmarked for the debt repayment and interest. So we know that in 2025, 2026, they've got a maturity that they need to pay off, hence the 40 billion. The 10 billion will also be a maturity that they will have to pay. So we've looked at their debt maturity, hence we've agreed that there's enough room for Eskom, and then we can then reduce the 70 to 50 billion. So it was purely based on Eskom's financials and Eskom's books. We looked at the books. We know what they have to pay at the end. The value of the AEFC, the finance company, as I've indicated, it was 4 billion. It was determined by an independent valuation that was done on the book, and we then agreed to phase off the 4 billion and not take it as a bullet payment. Hence, the 2 billion in 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025. I do not think NT is using the conditions to introduce any private sector. The unbundling is informed by the unbundling report of the Minister of the then Minister of the Public Enterprises, which proposed the unbundling of Eskom into 3 entities that are subsidiary to the Eskom group. So this is not a privatization because these will still be 100% owned state entities. It's just that now you are able to then gain efficiencies by ensuring that you make these smaller entities and be able to then have a thorough oversight in terms of the operations of the entity. If I then, Honorable Chair, move to Honorable Mazibuko. Yes, we've seen that Eskom has been able, and it has the capacity to improve itself. Eskom's primary difficulty was around managing its debt and interest. The numbers are showing now that there's discipline in the entity. The entity is able to then improve its operations. Hence, we've seen a reduction in the load shedding despite the setbacks in early this year. But the entity is actually on the right footing as we're looking at it now. There are no improvements in the Munich debt. As I said, it's one of the risks that we are monitoring closely. If you look at the numbers now, they are close to 100 billion, which is a worry because what that means is that it is taking away the liquidity from Eskom. This is the amount that Eskom was meant to use to continue with its operations. Now they are providing a service and they are not getting any revenue for that service. So it means that they are using their own cash balances to actually fund the operations because they are not able to get anything. Solutions, we are having a number of sessions with Eskom, trying to find solutions on how we can actually assist in turning around the Munich debt issues. I must also indicate that this is not only a Treasury matter, but it's across government. We are trying from Treasury. There is a debt relief program that is linked to this one on municipal debt. And we are also engaging with other sister departments to ensure that we can assist Eskom. But yes, it is something that requires government in its entirety to actually look into the Munich debt. If I may then move, Honorable Chair, to Honorable Mkondo. Yes, the turnaround, so far, we are encouraged by the turnaround. We are looking at the numbers, and if we keep it this way, we are hoping that as Eskom at some stage will be able to then stand on its own without having government assistance. And Honorable Chair, on your comments, I think we note them. I think Eskom will then be able to best place to report on the details around the prosecutions, the losses, and how they've actually dealt with that. But we know that this is a matter that has taken their priority in terms of ensuring that the infrastructure vandalism is actually being considered quite seriously. Chair, with that, let me pause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Thank you for the feedback. If you can, I will then write to Eskom more specifically to see if I can get responses on those, given the risk that it places. I see Honorable Wakelin and Honorable Mwali have got their hands up. I did ask questions earlier, and there were no hands that went up. If we then open another round, we will not be able to get through the next presentation, what we need to do. Is there anything? Can I ask that we proceed from this point and take the third presentation?
Chair, we'll just post it, a written question then. It's just about the update on the debt management program between municipalities and Eskom. I wanted to answer.
That's fine. If we can then place it on a written format, is that okay with you, Honorable Mwali?
It's fine, Chair. I think I have no option. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Let us then keep going. We'll then move to the third presentation on unfunded mandates. Can I ask that for National Treasury to proceed in this regard?
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. I hope my screen is visible. I hope you can see my presentation. It's meant to be quite short, but let's see how we go. Honorable Chair, I want to assist you in terms of managing time. So we in this presentation we've got I think we just need some definition issues to just start with. Also, we have put together some case studies for the honorable members to understand the scale of the problem. And obviously, we've chosen the metros to do that because that's where the main challenge is. We're gonna take the honorable members through the root causes and also what the Treasury has been able to do in various phases. Obviously with the involved sectors, but also the proposed solutions. We may also, honorable members, touch on some of the emerging issues as well in the space which complicate the issue of the unfunded mandates quite a bit. So yeah, I think if I were to be asked to sum this up in maybe say 5 seconds, I would say, you know, the issue of unfunded mandates is when the provinces give municipalities responsibilities that do not come with the requisite funding. So whether it's the full responsibility or whether they give partial funding for that. So that's what we consider as unfunded mandates. And then these have been obviously over the years increasing, as you're going to see in my next slides. But what is quite important also is that, this is a space that has evolved over time. It started as an unfunded mandate. It is now at a point where we actually call it an underfunded mandate, because there are some efforts that have been done to try and address these issues, and the provinces have really been able to respond quite positively there. But there's obviously still some gaps that need to be filled in them. The key sectors that where this issue is quite prevalent in the health space. We've had a number of engagement with the Department of Health, the library services, the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture has come on board there, but also there are emerging issues which are quite long-standing but haven't been resolved also in the human settlements as well as the transport space. And these are really linked to the devolution and assignment of functions, which obviously are being promoted by government. And with NHI, obviously, now an act, if that also as well is not managed well, it could also worsen the impact in terms of the municipalities, as municipalities also continue to play a big part in that space. This then, honorable members, is just a few municipalities that we have chosen in terms of the metros to give you a sense of the scale of the issue. As you can see, the big metros have really been hard hit by the impact of these unfunded mandates and underfunded mandates. And what we're trying to actually now ascertain is whether actually in this process there are those self-inflicted issues where actually municipalities take on the functions from the provinces with the promise that they will get money, but they still continue to do those even though they don't get money. And where they simply just have an interest in a function. So in the coming I think months, we will be able to then be able to differentiate between the true underfunded or those that are self-inflicted. But we continue to have these conversations with the municipalities. The numbers you see on this presentation are presented were shared with us by the municipalities in the various engagements that we have had with them in trying to get to the bottom of the issue. As you can see, the city of Cape Town and city of Ekurhuleni is where the most impact is at. And obviously, those shortfalls then mean that, these metros then have to tap into their own revenues to be able to close the gap. And in other instances, it just worsens their financial position. So, yeah, I think when it comes to the root cause of this challenge, it's obviously, the inconsistency in terms of how the law is applied, and how these service level agreements have been put together. There are instances where they exist, but in other instances, it's more like a gentleman's agreement, and the National Treasury actually sometimes is not even aware of these arrangements that are being made between the provinces and municipalities. And obviously, as a result, this really causes a challenge for the Division of Revenue Act, which promotes transparency and certainty, because also through that process or through that legislation, we ensure that the funds do follow the function. So we then have those kind of challenges there. And obviously, also it is the Division of Revenue that looks at issues around a or poor allocations, which then, if these are not clearly articulated in that act, it does mean that we can't even ensure that how this is applied on the ground, that the same principles are being applied. So we do see that, especially in these metros, there are issues around the staffing costs that are not accounted for, especially as it relates to the funding then that gets to be passed on to these municipalities. Quite important is that the funds follow the function principle is applied in how these functions are funded. So if the function is with the provinces legitimately, then the agreement that exists really dependent on the provinces then passing on these to the funds to the municipalities are concerned. And the efforts then that have been made, I think this will be covered in 3 phases. There is the initial phase where the Treasury did the analysis, obviously, because of the many complaints that we were receiving from municipalities through our benchmarking engagements. Therefore, we wanted to understand the scale of the problem and what we could do. So we have identified the scale in terms of the financial implications, but we've then from there engaged the provincial treasuries to say here's an issue that each province needs to deal with, but also the metros in terms of these are the functions that you are undertaking, but we're not seeing proportional allocations from the provinces coming to yourselves. And then we've engaged a national departments concerned to then say, your policy positions have caused this, you need clarity in as far as that is concerned. So work really continued in that space, being led by the Treasury. But also we then, engage in terms of the division of revenue to really provide some, provisions in the act to promote transparency and certainty. So I think it was in 2018 where we actually made a provision to say, these arrangements between provinces and municipalities, need to involve the provincial treasuries as well, because what we had identified through the engagements we had with the provincial treasuries is that in other instances, it is actually the sectors that make these decisions and they are also not involved. So we had to put that there to ensure that they get maximum exposure to the kind of decisions that are being made. And then obviously there was then COVID, so a lot of issues there crept in. The financial pattern on metros became even more evident, but also there were some of the decisions that we made, especially in some of the provinces, which also caused some strains in terms of the intergovernmental relations processes. And we also picked up that actually there is also an emerging issue in the energy sector where Eskom and municipalities also have some gentleman's agreement where the license is with Eskom, but the delivery is with the municipalities. There's also lack of clarity there in terms of the SLAs. There's also a question around the quality, because what then happens to the assets and so forth. So that also is an area that is emerging that we continue to look at. Then beyond that, I think the Treasury has really renewed its interest in this area. It has made a significant effort in terms of engaging the relevant sectors. Specifically, we have engaged with the library sector to try and address that issue. There is an agreement in terms of the transfer, but that is not finalized yet. There is a conditional grant which also is meant to assist with that. All the provinces had to then speak to all the municipalities that are providing the library services to then see which of the options available work better for them. In some provinces, actually, in most provinces, I think there is an agreement in terms of how that will take place. So, for instance, some of the options that were taken was to say the municipalities would then continue to manage that, and then there would be transfers in terms of these grants and other funds, as well to then operate and build the libraries. However, when it comes to the new libraries that are being built, those will then be run and operated and built by the provinces. So different provinces adopted a different kind of an approach, but we are not at the point now where we can say the issue has been addressed, because there are some obviously areas that still need to be looked at. I think in the health space, there was an acknowledgement from the Department of Health in terms of the burden, and it has really committed to rectifying that, but it also looking at how then to do that in a responsible manner to ensure that the transition period does not harm and affect, the service delivery. So that also is an area that we've made quite some headways on. Obviously, there are some emerging spaces in the environmental sector, which we're looking at quite closely in terms of the impact that is emerging in that space. But conversations continue with other sectors that are involved in this space as well. So some of the short-term solutions that we're looking at, obviously, to ensure that, the funds follow the function. So where the function is, the funds should go. So how then do we ensure that the legal parts of the powers and functions are aligned to how the delivery takes place? So the Treasury there is engaging all the stakeholders that are involved to see which sectors will apply which criteria, but also to then develop a transition arrangement where, for instance, these functions should shift from one sphere to the other, following the proper protocols and legislative provisions that exist. And in all that, it's a question of how then do you protect the staff in terms of the employment conditions, because the pay across the two spheres of government is quite different as well. So you need to tread carefully in as much as how you want to deal with this. There could be instances where, government gets to be played actually in the whole system. So we need to be watchful for that as well. In terms of the long term, because the funding is currently provided for these functions, it's just not cascading to where the application is, and it's difficult to ascertain where the application is without a formal arrangements. So we would then be in a position to then create an equitable funding mechanism for those that are involved. If these functions, for instance, are then formally shifted to municipalities, then obviously it's about augmenting the local government equitable share. And obviously, because these funds sit with the provincial equitable share, would also need to make adjustments there, and also across the various affected conditional grants. This is also how then do we ensure that the Constitution, in terms of the powers and functions, is also aligned to these functions and how they are envisaged to work quite well. Whether the question is, how then do we ensure that we make proposals to the amendment of the Constitution to then fit the delivery model that is best suited for the current realities that we have, and obviously all these will then lead us to that sustainable funding solution that we are all looking for, But if none of these options really work, it's a question of municipalities that need to think hard about continuing to carry out these functions and actually think about how then to return these functions to the provinces, which is something that in the health space is currently being deliberated on. So I think in a nutshell, Chairperson and honorable members, we want to make it clear that these unfunded mandates or underfunded mandates actually pose a significant barriers on our municipalities, especially the metros. And because they disregard the legislative frameworks that are in place in terms of the Intergovernmental Relations Act and related legislations, it makes it difficult for government to then guard against the abuse and also the exploitation that is taking place in that space. We do think that this is not an issue that just one institution can address. We think, this is a multi-stakeholder approach, and also that we should allow the different sectors to inform the various modalities that need to be looked at there. So a collaborative approach will be quite important. But in the meantime, we need to be prioritizing ensuring that service delivery is not affected through this. And then that the intergovernmental cooperation and governance is also followed. Honorable Chair, that's this last slide from my side. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the presentation. Now I will allow for members to place their questions, and then we can go from there. If a member would like to place a question, I recognize Honorable Waitlin, Honorable Galeka Mazibuko, Honorable Douglas, and then Honorable Nkonto. So starting there, let me start with Honorable Waitlin. Over to you.
Chair, am I visible and audible?
You are both those things. Now the challenge is to convince us of your intellect.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, yes, I originally requested a conversation around unfunded mandates, and it has been ongoing for a long time now. I want to just thank the member for the submission and the conversation that we're going to have subsequent to the presentation. Chair, there's a few fundamental issues. The one is obviously legislative of character that is concerning. We continuously budget for both province and national and as well as municipal. But the concern I'm having is more around provincial versus the local government's mandates and the work they are supposed to do, and the interaction between the two levels or spheres of government. Which legislation do we need to change? I think that's the question we need to ask. There's obviously a number of legislative frameworks we need to look at, because we can't continue in this fashion. And the burdens that are placed in particular to municipalities is a big, massive issue for me. We saw the condition that municipalities are faced with, and now continuously have to bail out province in particular with some service delivery matters. I don't necessarily think it's the other way around, unless Dr. Pakis can educate me a bit on that. So the legislative part is the one. The second matter is the financial aspect. Do we have on any record the value of these unfunded mandates? Is there anybody that's actually tracking the number and the rand value between the spheres of governments and the impact that unfunded mandates has got? If not, we should. And I'm not sure where we park this. We possibly will have to park it with National Treasury to have an overseeing view on this matter. Those are the two main aspects for me, Chair. And part of that, there's a third aspect which I rather would like to speak on later, which is the operationality and the operations part of it, and the impact it has on HR and particularly where HR is involved in spheres of government which they don't even have legislative protection. But that's a different discussion altogether. But I think these two fundamental matters I would like us to have a conversation on. Thank you, Chair. And if I don't see you, have a wonderful weekend.
No, you have convinced us of the latter. So let's move on to Honorable Galega Mazibuko.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Honorable Wicklin, it's not yet weekend, it's Wednesday today.
Yes, I
We're
was
still far away. Thank you. Thank you very much to Dr. Pakis for the presentation. And I want to echo the same sentiments. You know, Chair, this problem of unfunded mandates and underfunded mandates has been continuing for long. I mean, I was the MMC between 2011 to 2016. We've been having this same problem of unfunded mandate. And I'm saying, you know, we cannot have the same problem over and over the years, and there is still no solution. Because at the end of the day, people who get affected are the ordinary citizens on the ground. I normally say no one lives nationally and no one lives provincially. Everybody lives at a local government space. So it is really unfair for municipalities to be expected to tap into their own revenue. And the situation in the municipalities currently, municipalities are bankrupt, they do not have money, so they can't be expected to tap in their own revenue because they actually don't have revenue. So, I mean, the funds should follow the function, but it shouldn't be a lip service. It shouldn't be forming of committees and nothing is happening. So I think the engagements should bear fruits in this regard, Chair. And the returning of the function to provinces, for me, is not a solution. That I have seen it where when the EMS was returned to the province, the transition was so difficult. It was so problematic. And the people who get affected are the ordinary citizens that are expecting these service deliveries. We had problems where the ambulances were not pitching up and people would die on site because of the lack of the turnaround for the ambulances during that transitional period. So I think really, and these issues of the SLAs and all that, my proposal here, Chair, would be to standardize the practices or the functions. We cannot have different provinces having different approach. So for metros, there has to be a standard practice on how the SLAs and what should be contained in the SLAs. It should not be the discretion of individual municipality and individual province. We cannot have a situation where as government, there is a sphere of government that is opposed to another sphere of government. We're talking about the lives of the people here, not about the egos of any sphere of government. So that is my take here. The Treasury should lead this. We cannot have discussions forever and they don't bear fruits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Galega Mazibuko. Honorable Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is one of the key areas that we have a problem in, Mr. Chair, and it affects the poorest of the poor, and especially rural and peri-urban communities. Treasury's own presentation admits that our cities and towns are crumbling under billions of rands in underfunded and unfunded mandates. This is a crisis, Mr. Chair, and it really is something that we need to deal with. If you look at the numbers, Cape Town, it's 2.5 billion rand shortfall, which affects the colored and African communities disproportionately. Ekurhuleni, 2.3 billion. Johannesburg, 1.2 billion. Tshwane, 268.5 billion. eThekwini, 344 billion. And it goes on. There's a combined shortfall of 6.7 billion. Funds that municipalities are expected to raise themselves to perform national and provincial functions. This is unconstitutional, it is unsustainable, and it is sabotage. So the questions I have for Treasury is, where is the annual Treasury audit of underfunded functions by sector, metro and province? I know it was commissioned, but has it been published? Why are municipalities funding provincial health clinics out of their own pockets? Where is the ring-fenced allocation for this in the division of revenue bill? Why has the 2016 Treasury diagnostic report on unfunded mandates never been implemented? Where is the accountability for that? We need to see that and see if things have changed since then. And then also, why is GMA, and GMA is the Government Immovable Asset Management Act. Why is GMA still blocking municipalities from investing in community clinics and libraries? Why hasn't this apartheid era logic been repealed? I mean, that bill basically says that municipalities can't build or improve clinics on land that they don't own, which is really very silly because we don't. Municipalities sometimes have to work on other land. And then why do provincial departments fail to sign SLAs with the municipalities before assigning new functions? Why are human settlements programs shifted to metros without funding for land acquisition, bulk infrastructure, or post-occupancy maintenance? It's pointless us telling people we're going to create, you create homes for people, but then you don't give them the money to buy land or for the bulk infrastructure. We need to make sure that we have a full value chain approach to human settlements, Mr. Chair. Can Treasury provide a province-by-province list of functions delegated to municipalities between 2010 and 2025 with corresponding funding transfers for the committee, please? And then what is the total unfunded operational cost of health facilities being run by municipalities in 2025? And I will then give the rest of my questions as written submissions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have Honorable Mkhonto?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, my first question will be, why is the National Treasury or the national government not being the one that is doing the determinations as to which functions must be at local government and which ones must be at provincial government? Because, Chair, we are observing a big brother syndrome here by the provincial governments towards the local government. Then we will go back as the EFF to say we strongly propose that the allocations, budget allocations, the equitable share to the municipalities being raised from 9% to 14%. And before these functions are given to local government, I did not hear anything talking about the capacity of the municipalities to execute those functions, because that is the core of this whole matter, Chair. We are complaining that most municipalities don't have a capacity to execute even what they already have now. And then what about the additionals that are being given by provincial governments, yet they don't transfer the funds, they transfer only the functions, and then at the end of the day is the ordinary citizens, the poor and the dejected that are affected. So, Chair, we support that the proposal by National Treasury that there must be a full transfer of national funds to municipalities, and that will be the most sustainable alternative than to put provincial governments as middlemen, yet we all know that they don't collect any revenue. They are just keeping back funds that they don't even assist in generating. That That is my input, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mkonto. Can we have Honorable Mwali?
Honorable Chair, I won't say much because I was largely covered by our colleagues from the questions that they asked. But this is a very concerning presentation. We welcome the presentation as MK Party, but very concerning this issue of unfunded mandates. It's not about a sheer incompetence, but it tells us that national and provisional government had destroyed local government and metros in particular. When there was a proposal for establishment of regional electricity distributors during the late 90s and 2000, it became clear that the models are following will the models we are following will simply not work, but will continue to be used, but we continue to use with all the three. Nevertheless, the country is today paying a price for all these failures, Chairperson. Now, the question is, why is the National Treasury picking up these issues now, or these challenges now, at the time when the country is facing an economic stagnation? And number two, how are we going to survive? How are we going to survive every level of government? How are we going to survive when every level of government, SOEs, metros, require bailouts or assistance at the time we face the fiscal challenge? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Can we then take responses on that regard? Dr. Pakis?
Thanks, Chairperson, and thanks to the honorable members for the insightful questions and comments. I think we will take note of these in terms of the work agenda that we had set out for ourselves. The honorable members would note that the Treasury wants to lead in terms of the discussions with the relevant sectors to get to the bottom of this issue. Where we sit, honorable members and chair, we're concerned about the impact of this in terms of the financial sustainability of municipalities. It fits in well with the work that we are doing in terms of reviewing the funding model for local government as well, something that has been raised quite sharply by this committee as well. So in terms of where this is best placed, we do think that there is a need to formalize the arrangements. So the conversations would be on the timelines with the sectors and what needs to be in place in terms of the legislation to make that effective. So in terms of the question around which legislation do we need to change, obviously I think the main a source of perhaps some of these issues would really stem in terms of the Constitution itself, because the Constitution in terms of Section 156 as well as Schedule 4 and 5, they outline the functional areas of provinces and municipalities. The question then is whether those are still applicable. I mean, in all the conversations we are having with municipalities as well as the provinces, and the sector departments, the question of whether the libraries function actually, should be with the provinces is one that, leaves quite a bit to, I think, propel one to think that perhaps that should be something that needs to be looked at that level. But however, there are also sector-specific legislation that then places the function in terms of the various or whether it gets to be delegated and so forth. And also I think there might be a need to relook at the intergovernmental relations a Framework Act, which currently provides for a framework for cooperation between the three spheres of government. But I think the enforceability in terms of the mechanisms that are involved and how to settle disputes over issues like the unfunded mandates is something that would also need to perhaps be looked at there, because even though there is, I think, in other areas, a determination of the quantum, but there's also a lack of, enforcement that can be done in terms of really enforcing that the provinces make funding that is that should be made to the municipalities. The comment around the Government Immutable Asset Management Act, I don't have an answer to that, honorable members, in terms of why it hasn't been repealed. But just to note that, if we can sort out the issues around the functional areas, then it removes the prohibition that are then placed on municipalities. Because if municipalities, then can have the function legally, so then it becomes their responsibility to then do the maintenance in that space as well. So also, I think on the question of the financial aspects, whether we've got a record of the value of the unfunded mandates, I don't think it's comprehensive enough, honorable members. The numbers that we've shared with you today are coming from that report, but I don't think it covers every municipality, because as you would understand, there are delegated municipalities where the National Treasury has delegated to the provincial treasury. So those reports and the verification of those reports are the responsibilities of the provincial treasury, and that work is underway. But then there are these 17 non-delegated municipalities where, as the treasury, we've been working quite closely with the municipalities involved to clean up the numbers. And there, I think we do have a good record of the value of the unfunded mandates. Honorable Kalek, I think we agree with you. It's unfair to expect municipalities to tap into their own revenues, which are also under a lot of pressure as well. Which is why we would also want this issue to be resolved. But we also want municipalities to also, refrain from accepting responsibilities, because they do continue to take responsibilities that do not come with funding and do not come with the formal arrangement in terms of how that will happen. We also agree, I think it's a good suggestion around the standardized SLA for the functions in order to ensure that, it addresses the issue of capacity. There's an understanding across the municipalities in terms of what is then expected. Honorable members, I'm not aware in terms of where the annual audit that the Treasury did. I'm hoping that my colleagues in the platform, if Jan is here, I think he would shed some light in terms of that. And then the ring-fenced amounts in the division of revenue actually ring-fenced for the particular functions and where the current functions lie. So if a function is formally that of a province, then obviously the funding would then be in the division of revenue going to the provinces, not the municipalities where there is an outside agreement that exists. So you wouldn't find then an expression in the division of revenue that speaks to these intricacies in that unfunded mandate space. And then why provincial departments fail to sign these SLAs. I think as we gather this information, as we engage with these stakeholders, we will get to the bottom of that, honorable members, and then we'll share that information with yourselves as well. We also note that you have asked for provinces in terms of the list of all the functions that have been delegated to municipalities. And then Honorable Mkonto, in terms of why national government is not doing the determination as to which functions should be given to which sphere. Again here, honorable members, I think the issue is such that these things happen outside of the formal processes. So national is not even aware in other instances of these arrangements that the provinces are having with the municipalities. So it then becomes difficult to then guide that a process. And then we note the comment by Honorable Mwali in terms of the impact that national and provincial governments have done in terms of destroying the local government financial space, and we do agree that it has had an impact in terms of municipal financing. And then it's a real question now in terms of how then do we get to the bottom of the issue and assist municipalities in this space, which is the work that then honorable members, we have outlined the work that we are doing to try and assist in that space. I'm not sure if there are any colleagues of mine who would want to weigh in at this point, Honorable Chairperson, in terms of the other areas that they might be responsible for in this space. Thanks.
I don't see any other hands from there. Let me firstly, some of these can be responded by in written format. So I want to thank the team from Treasury, Dr. Rendani, and the rest of the members of Treasury. Thank you so much for the presentations today. I'm sure there'll be more engagement as we work towards the adoption of the appropriation bill, and naturally some of the Eskom debt amendment bill, which is coming up. So those two items will then be considered in the next number of weeks, I would imagine. So I want to thank you, and thank you so much for your participation and contribution, and thank honorable members for the respective questions that you can. Thank you very much. Just whilst we remain on the platform, honorable members, we've only got one additional item for consideration, which is our draft program. So may I ask Mashile if you can present that, if you can. Mashile. Mashile, may I ask if you can present the program for the term, please? Colleagues, Noliolo, I'm not sure if you have the presentation with you. Thank you. It is only showing half the screen for me. Would you be able to present the full thing? May I request, Mashile, we are not winning with the particular presentation that is here. I'm not sure what the technicalities are here. Do other honorable members?
Yeah, are you able to see it? It's on the screen. Do you see the full screen?
No, we don't. Well, I don't see the full screen. Are there any other honorable members who are able to see the presentation before?
No, Mr. J, it just looks like
Okay.
We don't even see half of it yet.
Okay, let me, okay. It's going to be there just in a second. Can you see it now?
No.
Let me just reload.
Mr. Chair, I see a picture of Darren, so it may be that the screensaver is actually showing instead of the document.
Yeah, that is
I think
what
I've got a challenge. Yeah, I'm trying to load it in here. It shows on my side, but I'm trying to check if I can try the other means. Is it there?
Still not, Mashile. We'll let you know when it's on.
Okay.
How come the other presentations were able to be flighted and this one can't?
I'm not really sure because it shows on my side, but I'm not sure what is really happening. I'm
Is there
going to
anyone
see
else with sharing rights who can be able to show this so that we can move? Honorable Bateman, I see your hand is up.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to try. You just have to make me the presenter then.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't got the rights yet. It still says disabled.
Yes. Yeah, the rights have been conferred, Honorable Bateman.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. This is fun.
Can you post it also on the WhatsApp group?
Okay.
Honorable Bateman, are you winning?
I just have to I have to exit and then rejoin, but I think it's been shared now.
Now we can see it. Yes. Can you scroll down, please? Honorable members, Mashile, these are the proposed dates that speak to our terms program. The only additional input I would like to make is obviously that the two dates, as we'd spoken before, I will send a formal invitation to all members. We were having a growth scenarios workshop with the University of Stellenbosch and a number of policy experts on growth. That is now going to be moved potentially to Friday, the 7th of May. Given that, or Friday, the Friday after the 6th of May, it's Friday the 9th of May, given that also we will be voting on the 6th of May. I think also it's going to be important that we will insert onto here the special meeting we will have to finalize the draft report. That will be scheduled next week, and next week is a complicated week because it's got leave options and all of that. That will be a virtual session to consider the final parts of the report because we can't leave it to before the 6th of May. It has to be passed by next week. So that report has to be considered next week. Other than that, the rest of the dates remain intact. Mashile, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on to that.
Yeah, no, I understand. And when exactly do we intend to meet next week so that I can adjust this? I cannot adjust on this one because it's not enabled for editing, but I will do adjustments after this. Do we meet
Yes.
on a Tuesday? Yes.
We are waiting the final.
Chairperson.
Yes,
Chairperson.
Mr. Makakula.
Sorry, man, to just come before you conclude. I think we, as much as you will want to adopt the report next week, but I will certainly say probably we say tentatively, because there is a process that we have started yesterday that involves the consultation of the stakeholders that we've invited yet as per our founding legislation, the money bills. So we have already sent you the letter to look at it, and then so that we can get the response. So basically what I want to tell you is that depending on what advice we are going to receive from, or any comments from the FFC, SARCA, the PPO, and the Minister of Finance, as we have agreed yesterday, we might have to say, for an example, I want to give you two scenarios. If the committee agrees that we have to amend the division of revenue bill, if we agreed that we have to do that, then the law requires us, we have to consult the affected provinces, the affected municipalities. Then by implications, you are not going to adopt the report next week. So I'm just saying, let's say tentatively, until we receive like the communication from the people who are inviting. Otherwise, if the committee took that route, we're not going to adopt the report next week, because then the process gets extended to the other affected parties. That's what I wanted to submit, Chair.
Thank you, Sfiso. I did get your note, and that's why in my opening submission, I said it will have to be tentative, given the fact that we await then feedback from the respect of the consulting parties that we've sent communication to. We are trying to push hard to make sure that matter is finalized so that we don't have to adjust on the 6th of May. That goes on from there. Honorable Galega Mazibu.
Oh, okay, Chair. I think your final statement maybe covers me, because I was going to ask Fiso that if we do not adopt the committee report next week, what effect will it have in the entire process, which leads to the legislated deadline for the adoption of the division of revenue bill?
It's simple, Honorable, just in a simple answer. The Money Bills Amendment, the Money Bills Act, particularly the amended legislation, we are given the 35 days, including the NCOP, to pass the division of revenue bill. However, the law also says that we can pass it as soon as reasonably thereafter, which then the reasonability, when I was doing like the workshop sometime this year, it becomes subjective with what is it that is reasonable to Parliament. But we must pass it within 35 days, including the National Council of Provinces. But we can also pass it as soon as it is reasonable after those 35 days have expired.
Yes, so it is so given that, we have to then work. I am working hard to try and finalize the support before the 1st of May. That is part of the work that we're working on, and I'm trying to push as best as we can. So we will continue the engagement. The only adjustment, as I was saying, is that there will be a tentative insertion of that date. So with only that amendment still forthcoming, may I ask that we look at the program that has been presented here, and if there are any other adjustments, can we then take it to adopt it, and then we'll make the adjustment as accordingly. Yes, Honorable Bateman.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. This has an effect on the program, but I'm not sure whether it's within our remit or not. The public sector pension and related payments bill, and also other line items that are below the line. So if one looks at the budget, there's obviously the appropriations bill that covers all the main budget votes. We've got the Division of Revenue Bill, but there are other charges that go against directly to the National Revenue Fund. One of those is a new one called the Public Sector Pension and Related Payments Bill, where these expenses used to be covered within, I believe, within one of the programs of Vote 8, which is the National Treasury, and now they're being split out, and they're going to be charged directly below the line. They seem to be escalating quite rapidly, and it seems to me that they're not getting the same level of supervision that we apply for other kinds of expenditure, in the sense that they have to go through a committee and a budget vote and so on. And I just think this whole area of below the line charges is one that we need to just apply our minds to as Appropriations Committee and just make sure that it's covered. Either we need to just flag this for the Finance Committee and say, please, can you look at this in more detail, or we should look at it in more detail.
Can I ask, Honourable Bateman, the respective bill has not been referred to our committee. So I think if you could write for me a note so that I understand its fuller details, it would be difficult to consider it here and see whether we fit it into the program in this.
Can I clarify that?
Yes,
sorry, just to come before you again. That bill doesn't belong to our committee. It's a finance bill. It sits with the Standing Committee on Finance, so it's never going to come to our committee.
Okay. All right. Well, that answers the question. Thank you, Dr. Mahugula.
So can I then, in the light of that, honourable members, just put the program before you as a committee and ask if we can adopt the committee that has been tabled here, because the implications are obviously matters that speak to how we've gone about it, the rationales. We also looked at the appropriations bill, we looked at the items that are funded, and then we included the respective departments to come through. May I ask that we move for the adoption of the report? Honourable Jenkins, I see, Advocate Jenkins, I saw your hand is up, but can I ask for, we are dealing with this particular program at this point in time. May I ask if there's a member who can move for the adoption of this program?
Chair, I thought maybe Advocate Jenkins wants to intervene in terms of the legality of the program itself. I'm not sure.
I can check with him. Advocate Jenkins?
Chairperson, good afternoon. Afternoon, honourable members. I think I missed the name of the bill, but if we're talking about the Public Sector Pension and Related Matters Bill, that bill was incorrectly referred to the Standing Committee on Finance. And in yesterday, I think it's yesterday or last night's ATC, there was a reprint, and it was then referred to your committee, to the Standing Committee on Appropriations. That's Bill 3 of 2025, the Public Sector Pension and Related Matters Bill. So there was an administrative oversight. It was referred to the wrong committee, and it should have been referred to the Appropriations Committee in terms of Section 13 of the Money Bills Act. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much. Again, with reference to the bill, may I then request that we'll be able to look at it and then schedule it accordingly, because the committee will need to get a brief, etc., etc. I have not myself formally received any formal communication in this regard. So once it then gets referred to the committee, then we will insert it onto the program. Yes, Honourable Bateman.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could I ask that we ask National Treasury just to give us an understanding of what supervision is in place from Parliament with regard to the charges that are below the line, and if they can just take us through them. These are the charges, and this is the supervisory mechanism framework in which these charges are assessed by Parliament.
I'm sorry, Honourable Bateman. How are we discussing that right now?
Well, we're looking at the program, and obviously this is in the context of the overall budget cycle. And I think it's just important that we know what money is being charged to the national revenue framework. And
here's my dilemma. We've asked the members of National Treasury. Some of them have stayed behind for their obvious reasons, but the problem is some of them have left. The bill is not before the committee. So now we are discussing an item, in essence, that the rest of the members have not seen.
I think you're misunderstanding. Sorry.
So what I'm wanting to request is that when the bill is referred to the committee, obviously a brief would have to come from Treasury at which we can engage it substantially.
I understand that, but I think what I'm saying is a little bit different to what you're thinking that I'm saying. So I agree, we will look at the bill when it comes, and there will be a process that's followed. But there are also other charges that are made directly to the National Revenue Fund that are below the line. And just to have an explanation of what they are and what the supervisory framework is in relation to them is what I'm asking for. It could be a fairly short presentation, I think, and they could attach it to whatever other presentations they're doing the next time they're before the committee. So it doesn't necessarily require a separate meeting. It's just really for our own orientation, understanding to feel, because at the end of the day, when we sit with that budget and we see, okay, there's the line items, okay, there's the provinces, there's the debt service cost, and then there are a whole bunch of other little items. And this is one of them, the public sector pension related payments bill. So I'm glad that's going to get supervision. But there's other things, like there's a line item that speaks about something to do with CETAs and skills levy. And so I think we just need to understand. That's for my own benefit.
I understand your point. May I ask Honorable Bateman, given that we've moved off that presentation, we're dealing with a program, can I ask that you send me a written question? I will make sure Treasury responds accordingly, and that will be circulated to the whole committee. Can we proceed on that manner? Because at this point in time, we are discussing the program that is before us for the purpose of adoption. The issue here is that if we raise, this is a question that deals specifically with Treasury, which was an item we'd already shifted away from. So may I ask that we send a written question to them and they will respond accordingly. Is that okay with you, Honorable Bateman?
Chair, it's absolutely fine, but I would point out that I raised this because it is a programming issue. The question is, when would they do that? But however, I will certainly put it in writing, and we can take it further that way. Thank you.
Correct. Honorable members, we have a program here in front of us. May I ask that unless there are any other additions to the nature of the program and the dates that are proposed, can we move for the adoption of the program as tabled before us?
Chair, I move for the adoption pending the addition of the meetings, the next week meeting, as Mr. Maubane has said, Mashile. Yeah, so I move for the adoption of the current one, pending the addition of those dates.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kalega Mazibuko. Is there a seconder to the proposal?
I'm seconding, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kanyane. With those, we will then accordingly, hopefully by the close of business and certainly, or even before tomorrow afternoon being Thursday, be able to circulate the appropriate additional date that speaks to both the meeting to finalize the report, and hopefully we'll be able to get some clearer direction about when that date can be, including the question about the particular bill. We'll then be able to add that in addition. If that is agreeable to members, we'll then circulate those by close of business tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much, honorable members.
Chair, sorry.
Yes,
we've received an apology after the meeting had commenced from Honorable Gwangwa, who is attending the Chief Whips Forum meeting.
Thank you very much. That meeting, that apology will then be noted accordingly in the earlier aspects. Thank you very much, honorable members. We will then circulate the respective documents to members, and then, as I already communicated, the update on the previous issues. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned. May you have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My hand is up. My hand is up.
Oh, sorry. Honorable Khanyane, you said you wanted to raise something?
Yeah, no, Chair, thank you so much, and to all the members. I think by now, Chair, there are lessons that we have learned from the process that we were engaging in, the process of appropriations. And for sure, you know that it may even complicate and become more contentious as we go forward. So I want to suggest, Chair, that when we will be developing a program for the next quarters, we find a way to include preparations
for the next budget allocations when we still have time so that we can discuss this. We don't find ourselves in squamed spaces. And yeah, we find ourselves under very tremendous time pressures, and we are not able to process this with due diligence. For sure, even those from the from the National Treasury can agree that we need some reasonable time and space to deal with this matters. I can tell you it's not going to be, the road is not going to be as easy as it has been. There are new developments in the country and we cannot ignore that. So it requires all of us to recognize the current state of development in the country and in Parliament, and agree that there must be a new way of doing things. Thank you so much.
The comment is noted, Honorable Lekanyane, and certainly I do take the point that you are making in the light of the new developments that are taking place in country. So there's no debate about that. Already I'd asked the Speaker, which is our next meeting now, how we amend the money bills and related matters so that it gives more timelines, particularly to committees to process it. But also there's an understanding now, even amongst parties, that the budget making process needs to be more transparent. I'm just awaiting the more guidelines about it as we now discussing perhaps maybe at that level before you draft legislation around it as to how it can be more inclusive for other members to be able to participate. So the point you are making is not lost on us. It is something that we've been taking cognizant of. But I agree with you from a programming point of view that now the new reality says that we need to be able to adjust for time in how, particularly around the finance cluster, the budget is going to work. So I appreciate that, Honorable Khan. Thank you very much, honorable members. We will reconvene again next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, good colleagues.